Your Worship, we're ready to go.
Thank you, Dina. Good morning, everyone. We'll call this meeting to order. I'll ask if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest. If at some point throughout the meeting you find that you do, please declare it at that time. Deputations, presentations, petitions, and public meetings. We have two today. Our first one is Doug Hevenor, Carrie Jenkins, and Sherryl Flannigan of the NVCA, who will present to committee the 2022 Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority draft budget. So welcome to you all. Good morning, Sherryl. Are you going to be presenting today?
Through your worship, no, our CAO is going to be presenting and he just popped up.
Okay, good morning, Doug. I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. Today is going to be a little different than we have done in past budgets. We're not going to do a presentation and go through a slide deck. We'd like to speak to budget pressures and the question that was asked of us. It appears our levy has gone up. So I want to speak to that for council. So if I could have either Jocelyn or Dina bring up from the NVCA draft budget booklet, page 6. That's great. So if you look on page 6, you can see this is the CDA percentages and allotments that have been provided by M&R&F, and then it will scroll across. If we go down to the last line item, you'll see the Wasaga Beach portion. So you can see in 2020-21, your levy was 8.95%, and for 2022, your levy has gone up to 9.0%. Historically, for the last 2018 to 2021, you've experienced levy decreases. So if I can go back, in 2018, we proposed a budget with a 4.1% increase. Your levy decreased 3.55%. So you had like a 0.5% increase to your budget from levy. In 2019, we had a 7.7% increase, and your levy actually went down 3.41%, so you only were pressured 4.3%. In both 2020 and 2021, your levy dropped 3.17 and 2.03%, and you actually had negative levies. So when you look at this number, you can see an increase of about $12,000 from year over year. And that increase is directly impacted by a 1.1% increase to the levy. And then we put our NVC levy, our increase to that of 3.5%. So that brings you to a 4.6% increase. So that shows a $10,500 increase to your budget. So that increase is really driven by levy and pressures that we've had. And if I could right now, just scroll down to page 9. And we'll just look at those last line again, those Wasaga Beach levies for capital assets. Again, from 2018 through 2021, you've had a descending levy. You start at 9.7%, you've decreased down to 8.9% levy. And then in 2022, your levy increased by up to 9.0%. But you're still showing a decrease in the amount of capital funding that you're going to pay the NVCA year over year. So what I'd like to do right now, if I could, is bring Sherryl into the game and talk about some of the budget pressures that we've experienced before we take any questions, if that would be fine with you, Your Worship. Okay, Sherryl, if you could go through our draft budget presentation and just talk about the impacts, starting with the fact that we're forecasting we're going to see a drop in revenues of about $250,000 in just revenue itself. So, Sherryl, if you would, please.
Thank you, and through your worship, I just want to clarify one thing that our CIO said. He was talking about levy. The increase is actually your current value assessment has gone up. So your portion of the current value assessment within our watershed has gone up to 9.04%. Just wanted to clarify that in case there was any confusion. In regards to our budget pressures, probably what I'm going to say isn't going to be any news to any of you. The first one I know hit municipalities as well, and that's COVID. The loss of revenue has been devastating for many organizations. It was devastating for us in 2020. We have recovered a bit, excuse me, within 2021. However, we still are expecting a deficit with regards to our revenues this year. The NVCA has taken many steps to reduce our expenditures so that we are not in a deficit position for the end of the year, but we're still kind of not 100% sure where we're going to be. It's going to depend on planning fees. It's also going to take us some time to build back up some of those revenues. We host weddings at our site. These are a huge revenue generator for us and really cut down on the amount of levy that our lands department needs. However, as I'm sure you can imagine, that was devastated throughout COVID. We've had a couple of weddings come back this year. We're hoping for a full house next year, but we're not 100% sure because it really depends on what happens with COVID. The next budget pressure, I always feel like a hamster on a wheel talking about this one because it never changes, and it's the provincial transfer payment. A number of years ago, it was cut in half by almost 50%, but there's no increase. There's no cost of living increase to it. There's nothing that is affiliated to any sort of an increase, and so it doesn't change. And we don't get any more money for one of the really most important core programs of ours, which is our flood forecasting department. The largest of our uncontrollable costs and budget pressure for the NVCA in 2022 has been the increase to our insurance benefits. Our insurance rates for the 2021 part of 2022 year astronomically increased to 22%. It was a 17.4% increase and then a 4.6% increase due to the values and other factors within our buildings and such. So the total 22% increase was something that we hadn't budgeted for. It wasn't forecasted, and it hit us, and we've had to absorb that within this year's budget. And it's going to go towards any sort of deficit we do have. However, we've now been told by our brokers for 2022 to budget an additional 10 to 15% increase. So we had to increase our budget to what it is, plus an additional 10 to 15% within the 2022 budget. We are part of the Conservation Ontario Insurance Group, and what that means is we're part of a number of CAs that come together to get the best possible price for our insurances because we go in as a large group versus just a small organization. Some of the other ones that do hit us as well is our property taxes, our maintenance costs, and our software support, especially now that we've had to go remote. So some of those costs have gone up. With regards to how we address these pressures, staff look at 3-year trends. Although they were kind of skewed due to COVID, it does let us see a good picture of what our trends are like. We've continued to not fill the full-time position that was vacated due to a retirement. Instead, we've budgeted for a contract staff person, which does save us some funds. And then we always look at all of our expenditures to see where savings can be found and revenues to see if we can increase any revenues. Staff went to the board with a staff guideline for the budget in August, and were approved to create a draft budget with a guideline of $90,000 increase to our general levy. Staff came back at $89,768. So it was just below the board approved guidelines. And it's that increase is split between the 18 municipalities, as you could see on page 6 of this booklet. So Doug, I am done at this point. I'm not sure if you're ready to open it up to questions.
Yeah, through your worship, if we may entertain any questions from you yourself or council, we'd be happy to do so right now.
Okay, thank you, Doug and Cheryl. I'll just get you to take the presentation down so I can see people on the screen. Thank you. Today, council will be receiving this for information. As you know, we're currently looking at our MOU with the Conservation Authority and looking to update it and see how to best serve the residents of our watershed. I'll open it up for questions or comments. I'll go to Councillor Watson first as the council rep on the NVCA. If you have anything to add today, Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship. One quick question good morning, Doug and Sherryl and Carrie. Sherryl mentioned about current value assessment and that it had gone up for us. What's the explanation for that? Because we as a municipality are laboring under the fact that MPAC assessment has not gone up for 2 consecutive years, and that's affecting operations of all municipalities and ourselves. So why is ours up? I don't understand that.
Cheryl?
As far as NVCA goes, I mean.
So through your worship to Councillor Watson, I can definitely answer that. We are not in control of the current value assessment that we receive. The Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, they get the information from MPAC and then they distribute it to us. So what we receive is directly from MECP. What I can say is from my understanding with conversations with ministry staff is that the MPAC information they use is between 3 and 4 years old. So it really fluctuates in difference between what municipalities use and what we use. And we've been trying to get them to get more current, but until they do, we're stuck with what they give us because that's as per the Conservation Authorities Act.
This is a follow-up. Yeah, just as a follow-up. I would really question that because MPAC assessment is MPAC assessment. It shouldn't vary, and it is current, but it's been frozen. 2020 was going to be a reassessment year. They froze it then, and they froze it last year, and it should be the same everywhere. So it should not vary. So I would suggest maybe check into that because MECP is not responsible for assessment. Further question would be, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, Doug, but you've alluded to the funding cuts by the province, and of course conservation authorities in general have been under the microscope with the province, and the regulations are some regulations just come out within the last month or so, and I understand that the conservation authorities have until January 1st 2024 to address all the regulations and obligations, and there's multiple reporting dates during that 2022-2023 that conservation has to report to the province with. Conservation is also under review at the county level for efficiency review right now. This is one of the levies that municipalities don't have control over. It's much like OPP, so it comes to us, on a plate. Here's what it is, and $250,000 represents pretty close to 1% of our taxation. I'd rely on our treasurer to give me the number, but I think it's high 2s. How do you see the levy progressing over the next couple of years with these pressures that are coming, and are we going to have to absorb higher costs in the municipality with one of these uncontrollable ones that we cannot control? Thank you.
Thanks. Doug or Sherryl?
I'll take that through yourself, Your Worship, if I may. Thank you, Councillor Watson, for your question, and it's a very good question. The regulation process has occurred from 2018 to date. 9 months ago, Minister Yurek struck a committee, convened with Conservation Authority members, CAOs, senior staff, Conservation Ontario's general manager, as well as development community members, mayors from municipalities, and other members from the agricultural community. And they've been meeting every Monday morning for 9 months. And I understand once the regulations dropped, we had an opportunity to confer with some of the members from our group that were on that committee. They were very hard conversations, difficult conversations that were shared. It was a very open dialogue. And the thing that is very interesting when you look at the regulations, they're not really prescriptive. If we look at the regulation in a general broad view, there's nothing inhibiting anything that conservation authorities propose to do. There's just nothing. We can do whatever type of work we choose. Where the restriction comes in and where the guidance is provided is in the manner in which those programs are funded. So the core levy has been broken out into 6 strategic pieces. I won't go through them today. I'll leave that for a future conversation. But they are 100% leviable. And then Mayor Bafulci referred to an MOU. If you don't have work that is core and you propose to do the work, you will strike an MOU agreement with the municipal partners and the NVCA. Those could be multiply signed by multiple municipalities, or they could be made between individual municipalities. So when the pressure started and the regulations came out, everybody was really working hard to try to say, okay, well, 2022 has got to have all these changes in it. Well, you can see that that didn't occur. It's a status quo budget. Our forecast, to answer Councillor Watson's question, 2023 will probably be a very similar status quo budget with a movement towards addressing some of the non-core items and reducing the levy allocated to those non-core items. 2023 and 2022, fall of 2022 and spring of 2023, we'll see the development probably of the MOUs between municipal partners and the NVCA. 2023 will probably be a budget that we'll see some drops in things like potential of funding of levy use for stewardship or forestry or education or monitoring. All of our other programming right now appears that it's fully fundable through levy. So there will be some great conversations between your council and my staff and myself and probably our chair. There'll be some great deliberations at our board. But to answer Councillor Watson's question, we hope to be compliant by January 1st, 2024 and deliver a budget for the 2024 fiscal year that meets all the needs of the regulations that have just recently passed. Noting right now that in the phase 2 of the evaluation that's currently happening, they're discussing levy in that right now. They're also discussing fees, cross charges and administration costs and billing fees. The conversations have been going on for 2 months on that aspect. They just started that 2 months ago. There's been no comment made on how that will turn out. So there may be some impacts on that. So that's why the budget process will take longer to happen, because we don't have all the information, and we'll move forward in that respect. I think that we could move forward right now and continue to work through the municipal MOU for advisory and planning, and that's something that we'll work with Doug Heron on and your staff to have a document that's presented to you and you Mayor and Council. And there have been some aspects. If you chose to do your own flood review and hire a consultant to do that, that's fine. But your levy is paying us to review all that work. So there's a duplication in service that way. We're still going to be reviewing everything that a consultant provides the NVCA as charged by the Conservation Authorities Act. So there's really not been a lot of major changes to how the NVCA will interact with its members, other than those described items, the stewardship, the forestry, the education, and the monitoring aspects where levy has been non-core. I hope that answered your question, George, and thanks very much for it.
Okay, thank you. I mean, the discussion of mandate versus non-mandate has gone on forever, for as long as I can remember. I know when I was chair of the Conservation Authority, we created a chart to try and clarify it because there's always been a confusion about that. I'm hoping through the review of our MOU, we can narrow things down a little bit more. Councillor Wells, I saw your card up.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't know whether it's to Doug or to Sherryl, and I appreciate your saying, okay, you receive the values, the CVA from MPAC. But at what point do you take any responsibility to challenge that back to MECP and MPAC? It seems to me that if we all just accept it along the way and say, well, that's, that's what they gave us, so we have to use it, and that just continues down the line, then there's never any validation or verification of the significance of those validations. I looked at the charts, and granted they were only up briefly, so I may be out of line, but I just looked and saw the Town of Wasaga Beach current value assessment, and I then saw Town of Innisfil, Town of Bradford, West Gwillimbury, that to me did not seem significantly different when I first viewed in the terms of the CVA. I find that hard to understand given the nature of Bradford, West Gwillimbury, and the nature of Innisfil, that those CVAs should be anywhere close to each other. So who looks after sorting that out? Do we as a town have to take it upon ourselves to now go back and challenge? To me, Doug and Sherryl, when you look at those charts and see that kind of what I think appears to be a discrepancy, to me, on our behalf, you should be the ones challenging that and saying, okay, you've given us this assessment. Wait a minute, this doesn't make sense to us. Rather than just saying, okay, well, that's it. We'll tax you on that basis. Anyway, I've had my rant.
Sherryl or Doug, did you want to speak to that?
Yes, through your worship to the councillor, if I may. We don't get our numbers from Impact, so that's important to understand. So they're not being delivered a different set of numbers from Impact to municipalities than the NVCA or other conservation authorities. These numbers come from MECP, and we've asked perennially each year, why can't we use the impact numbers? We're getting these questions from council. As long as I've been here since 2017, that's the question that Sherryl has put to them when we get the numbers, we ask. In fact, from a budgetary standpoint, we used to get these numbers in July and August. Now we don't get these numbers until sometimes the middle of October, late October. So if you're trying to do a fiscal end budget for December and get it out to you guys for good, wholesome review, that's even a challenge. Yet that's going the wrong way for us as well. So we're asking, and we've been asking at the Conservation Ontario level, to the government level, at the ministry level and the deputy minister level. But there's been so many moving parts in MECP and in the Ministry of Natural Resources, which has now moved even further into Mines and Northern Affairs. So I don't know how to answer other than that we are asking that question.
Okay, thanks, Doug. And perhaps it's time to go the elected official way, and maybe our staff here can write a letter to who it needs to go to. And we can express that, and we can ask others to, in other municipalities, to support us as well, because it is something that needs to be looked at. Obviously, your conversations are falling on deaf ears, and so maybe it's time that we take a different approach. So perhaps we can do that here. Councillor Foster, you were next.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I got a little confused on that last reply because I was pretty sure Sherryl had said earlier that the CVA comes from the MECP through the MPAC numbers. And so I'm concerned there's a gap. There's more of, so we understand a few years ago, the government cut funding, which is actually called downloading. They're just running it down the pipe for someone else to pay. But if we as a municipality are setting our tax rate based on the MPAC, which as Georgia pointed out was frozen a couple of years back, and they're dealing with current value assessment that I thought they had said was linked to MPAC, and it's increasing. All it does is put the pressure on the municipality and thereby onto the taxpayer to cover this. So I don't necessarily need an answer specifically to that, but I welcome it. But then the other piece we have, and this will probably be done on through the MOU process, is that there's always been a question about core versus non-core items, and I assume the MOU is going to be defining that more carefully, because when you look at tough times and the budget pressures, COVID, that's not unique. That's not really acceptable. It's everyone's under the same budget pressures on that. So you sit there and say we have to figure out for ourselves and for our suppliers of services, let's call it that, how they can be more efficient doing the absolute what they're required to do, and that our taxpayers' money isn't necessarily going into making a better wedding venue. We want to protect the watershed. That's the ultimate responsibility, is to protect the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation watershed. So as the Councillor Wells said, that's my rant, or at least that's my first for today.
Sherryl?
Your volume.
Sorry about that, through your worship. I think it's very important for us to speak to what Councillor Wells said about Innisfil and Bradford West Gwillimbury. We don't have 100% of their municipality within our watershed. It's split between two of us, which is Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority as well. So that's why their numbers look a little bit different, or maybe look skewed to you. I do have the actual chart that we got from MECP that I think might be of value for you to see. I can either send it to you, excuse me, through your clerk, or if I'm allowed, I could share my screen quickly and give you an understanding of what it looks like, because I think that might help you understand how we get our levy information.
I would like to suggest that be sent to the clerk, who can share it with council members. It can also go to our Treasury Department, who I'm assuming will be also looking into the MECP versus MPAC, and we will also hopefully, and I'm looking at the CAO, be creating some letter that we can send off and have a different voice to deal with some of this.
Thank you. I will do that.
Is there any other questions or comments for now? Oh, Mr. CAO.
Thank you, Worship. A question to Doug. Part of our budget process, we establish goals and objectives for the coming year that we strive to achieve. And I'm just wondering, with respect to the NVCA, have they established some goals and objectives for 2022? And more specifically, is within that the goals and objectives, is a review of the regulated area included as one of those goals and objectives? Thank you.
Doug?
Yes, we have certainly identified the goals. I won't go through them this morning, but the regulated area is something that we're continually looking at, George. We review it when new data comes in. We look at aspects. One of the things that's under review right now at a provincial level is the establishing a minimum buffer. That minimum 30-meter buffer is one of the things that's happening right now on regulatory areas. Right now, in some areas, the wetland extends out 120 meters, and sometimes it's on the other side of the road, and it's not going to impact it. But the legislation states we have to review that. I think this going to a minimum buffer would alleviate situations where, and you're well aware of this, that when we do negotiate those terms and where those lines, those hard lines for development are, sometimes averages are allowed to accommodate, to get us the biggest and most robust building envelope that's respective of the most protection of the land within the development area. So it may see an elimination of averaging and an absolute, a more definitive line being drawn. So that's one of the things we're definitely looking at. I think as far as our goals and objectives, we started this process in 2019, developing a 5-year integrated watershed management plan. And earlier this morning, one of the councillors referenced that there's being a review at the Simcoe County level of CAs. They're using our integrated watershed management plan as a seminal document to guide their contractors on how they look at watershed management across Simcoe County. We have that up in place. We have a 5-year strategic plan that's supportive of that, a 5-year business plan that's supportive of that. They're all goal motivated and goal oriented. So yes, George, we certainly are trying to do that.
Go ahead, George.
Thank you, Worship. I think that the review of the regulated area, particularly as it pertains to lands within Wasaga Beach, I think it's worthy of review. Certainly, I've come across a few examples just in the last few months of where, the line may be there just because of historical information as opposed to reflective of what has occurred over the last few years. So I'm not sure if that could be fit into the goals and objectives of the NVCA, but certainly from my perspective, if there was an opportunity to review the regulated area within the boundaries of Wasaga Beach, it would be something that certainly, Your Worship, I would recommend that be supported. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you to our presenters today. We do have a motion here. I'll look for a mover and seconder. Moved by Deputy Mayor Bray, seconded by Councillor Wells, that Committee of the Whole receive the presentation from the NVCA pertaining to their 2022 draft budget for information. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Again, thank you, Doug and Sherryl. Have a great day.
If I may, Your Honor, just like to inform Council, I'm a citizen of Wasaga Beach. I'm a proud citizen of Wasaga Beach. I really appreciate the fine work that you're doing there, and it's a great community, and I'm happy to be a member of it. So thanks very much for your work.
Thanks, Doug. Okay, moving on to our next presentation. It's the 2022 budget discussion continued of draft number 1. So I will pass it over to Jocelyn, if she's on here.
Sorry.
Good morning. Good morning.
Morning. Are you passing it over to me now? Oh, sorry, I just didn't quite hear.
Okay, yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen here. And Dina, if you could confirm, please, that that's showing on the screen.
Yes, Jocelyn, it looks good.
Okay, thank you. So good morning to members of council and staff and our visitors. Today, we're going to continue with our review of the draft 122 budget with presentations from the leadership team. There are a few items that I'll cover first in a few slides, and then we'll move through the department presentations. And I just have to adjust my screen here for a moment. Okay. We began our budget kickoff on October the 7th with a presentation of the high-level changes in the budget from 21 to 22. And our proposed tax rate presented for draft 1 is 2.15%. And today's presentations provide the opportunity for more interaction between council members and staff. And staff have the opportunity to explain changes and major driving budget needs when they're presenting through their departments. So when reviewing budgets, we make adjustments that are necessary to maintain existing service levels. These adjustments are usually minor. However, if the demand has increased a lot, it may be necessary to increase resources more significantly to maintain the service level. There are some carryovers items from the 21 budget, and you will see some of these as we move through the presentations. There are new initiatives or replacements that are incorporated, which include fleet purchases and new capital projects. There are a couple of new software-related projects and a few studies to be completed, and a branding project. So these are some examples of the new initiatives. Opportunities for efficiency improvements are considered throughout the budget process, And an example where efficiencies are gained is when we implement new updated software. We also consider new enhancements where they're feasible. There are minimal service enhancements presented in this budget. The budget evolves as the multiple drafts are prepared, and sometimes new information becomes available, but we have to wait for the next draft. So we have a few items here that we've identified that will come forward for draft 2. And some of them are contract staff renewals, and we have some new staffing requests. There's, for policing, the adjustment to the contract price that we've now received. As noted just recently, NVCA's request for an increase to the general levy. We have aerial fire truck that will need to adjust our contribution to reserve based on the financial plan that we have selected. And for Beachfront, we have rental income adjustments for the final leases that have come into place. There will also probably be adjustments to our capital costs as we get better cost information as the budget process moves along. And lastly, we also consider reserve adjustments to help with tax rate stabilization. The town is financially stable. There are good reserves as of the end of June 21, there was close to 70 million in reserves and reserve funds. As well, the town's debt remains low at approximately 12.7 million, with a carrying cost of about 1.2 million per year. As a result of the strong financial position, the town can afford to incur some additional debt to complete new projects, such as the new twin pad arena and library. And a benchmark that demonstrates the town's fiscal strategy and the financial abilities for the town is that the proposed tax rate continues to be lower than most of its municipal comparators. Part of the budget focus is to address capital projects that will provide new financial revenue opportunities, such as new developments for Sunnydale and the beachfront. We also are using the low debt level and low interest rates to help provide capital financing. Grants are regularly applied for, and if one becomes available during the next year, we will apply for that for the twin pad arena and library. Contributions to reserves continue to be part of our financial plan, and planning for forecasting for sustainable financial plan that provides for a smooth tax rate year over year is part of our strategy. Asset management planning is also a high priority as the town finances replacements. Where a larger asset, such as a new building, is being considered, matching the long-term life of the asset with the long-term debt structure is beneficial. It is a fair application of paying for the asset when taxpayers with access to the asset are contributing to the financial payments. It's also a normal financing practice for large asset investments. Conservatism in revenue recognition is applied to ensure realistic results are achieved. So any revenues that are not budgeted to be spent that materialize later, these provide new funding for future opportunities. This slide and the next one are presented with corrections. The slide was originally shown on the October 7th meeting. Unfortunately, the 21 budget figures did not come through correctly. And this slide is a replacement slide for council members' budget binders. The main changes will be only in the 2021 numbers, the 97 million, 54 million for capital, and 42 million for operating. And we had one other slide that is being shown here with a different number for the events. While some of the events expenses did increase, which was shown on the original slide, the overall budget decreased as compared to the 21 budget, and this provides clarity in that information. So my apologies for these miscommunications, and these slides are presented for your binders. So are there any questions or comments before we proceed into the department presentations?
Yeah, I don't know if I can see everybody on my screen with the presentation up there, but I'll ask if there's any at this point. Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of quick items for clarification, if I could, before we get into departmental stuff. And these are more just to allow the treasurer to define things. So throughout the rest of the presentation, there are some items that I believe are going to be grant dependent, but they have to be shown. Is that correct? So there may be something showing there that looks like it's going to be X number of dollars, but it's only dependent on a grant coming to make it happen. Is that correct? Does that exist?
Through your worship to Councillor Foster, yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. And then, Your Worship, the Part B of this, actually there's two parts to Part B. First, and I've mentioned this before, I love the conservative approach that we use. It's very rare that I say I love conservative, but the conservative approach is good. It's great that way. But my question goes back to the slide where you're talking about our outstanding debt being 12.7 million, and you said the carrying cost is 1.2. I just want to be very clear that the carrying cost we're talking is a blended payment. It's not the interest only. It's a blended payment, which would be reducing the outstanding amount of the total debt. Is that correct?
Through your worship, yes, that is correct. So the carrying cost is 1.2 million, and that's principal and interest.
Yes.
On all the debentures that total the 12.7 million.
I figured that. Otherwise, we're looking at a 10% interest rate. But the reason I wanted to do that is from my previous life, we talked about cost of borrowing, and we're talking only about interest. But I want to make sure everyone's completely aware that we do have low interest rate vehicles that we owe money on, and that it's a blended payment, so it's reducing the overall principal. Those were my 2 points, Your Worship. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else before we move on? I don't see any other cards. Jocelyn, back to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Okay, so at this time, I will turn the presentation over to George Vadamunkar, our CAO. And Mr. Vadamunkar, please indicate next slide when you want me to move forward, and revert back to me when your question comment period is complete, and I will advance to the next speaker.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer, and good morning, members of council, Your Worship. So on your screen should be the council summary. If you've got your binder, your 2022 binder handy, we're at tab 6 in the binder, and we're on the second page. So in that binder in the second page is the detail of the council budget. I'm just going to highlight some of the significant points for the benefit of council. So included in the wages for members of council is the 50% of the executive assistant wages. Memberships include membership for AMO, which is about $8,600, and membership for the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Initiative, which is $2,750. Insurance has increased marginally. However, the Integrity Commissioner budget has remained at $20,000. We're trending substantially lower than that, but we've had years in the past where we've gone over. So at this point, we're keeping it at $20,000. The capital budget for 2022, we have council iPad life cycle at 5,000, and we tend to replace these every 4 years with the new council coming in. And we have some improvements to the council chamber visual equipment. Basically, it's the projector screen that we have in the council chamber. We're looking to upgrade that so that we have a clearer image on our screen for public presentations. Your Worship, that concludes the council overview, and I'd be happy to take any questions before we move on to administration.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions of the CAO's presentation? And I'm just gonna try and scroll through here because with the presentation there, I can't see everybody on the screen. So can we take it down in between, or is that, there we go. Any questions or comments? Okay, back to you then.
Thank you. So, Madam Treasurer, if you could flip on to the administration slide. And again, that's under tab 6, the following page. We're into administration. And the treasurer highlighted the decrease in the municipal partnership fund grant. In her earlier slide, she indicated about 230,000. Here it's 200, so it's in that range. That's slightly less than 1% of a tax rate increase. So that's an amount that the town has to absorb going forward. So that grant is declining. It's been declining for several years, and each year we have to absorb additional cost as a result of that. So I just wanted to point that out because sometimes that gets lost, and I'll re-emphasize that as we move forward through the budget process. Legal costs are budgeted at $25,000 for 2022. We're trending slightly lower than that at this particular point. However, in 2020 and 2021, we were overexpended. So we're going to keep it at that point. Advertising has increased from 8,000 to 15,000 to reflect regular ads and COVID ads. In keeping with one of council's priorities, we've put an emphasis on communicating with the public. So we're publishing advertisements, we're publishing newsletters, we're publishing inserts to get information out to the public. We're also using online resources, and those costs have been incorporated into the budget. Building maintenance, at this point in time, we are looking to increase the building maintenance budget, and this is for Town Hall. The facility is aging, and we are experiencing increased maintenance costs. I'll be reviewing this line with the facility foreman between the first draft and the second draft of the budget. We're going to see if we can develop a plan for maintenance for 2022 and possibly reduce this. But at this point in time, that's what we have in the budget for 2022. I'll pause here before going to the next slide to see if there's any questions.
Okay, thank you, George. And I'll just ask council members, a couple aren't on here, and we need the cameras on in order to keep it as a meeting. Thank you. Councillor Watson, your card is up.
Thank you, Your Worship. To the CAO, I really appreciate your point about the communications department through Mr. Jennings, I guess mostly, and his team and yourself. That in my time on council, I've never seen so much communication out to the residents with these newsletters, social media, and that. And I wouldn't mind getting possibly a report at some point, just to. I was thinking the other day, have we put out 2,000, 3,000, 1,500 communications between newsletters and all this? And I think that's important to know, because, we regularly hear that, we're not communicating, we're not doing this and that. And I think we're doing a great job. And I think it's going out, and it'd be handy to have to know, and how it's compared to the past somewhat, because it is important, and we want to communicate, and especially during COVID, because things have changed and we have to rely on that. So I think it's a very good news story, and if we could get that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. I completely agree. Mr. Jennings is probably pumping more out of his office than many municipalities combined. So absolutely doing a fantastic job. Deputy Mayor Bray, I saw your card up.
Thank you. I just wanted to highlight the fact that the CAO pointed out that the UMP fund, the Ontario Municipal Partnership Funding Grant, has decreased by 15%. Because that $200,000 equates to 1% increase to our residents. And as Councillor Foster pointed out, mean, that's direct downloading. So when the province cuts funding that we have relied upon for years, and I know we've known for years that this is being decreased, but it truly is just another way of downloading. And I think all taxpayers or all residents need to know that when they go out and vote, that whether you call a tax a municipal tax, a provincial tax, or a federal tax, you know, they are our largest source of revenue, and we need to kind of get it together because we are the level of government that sees the much smaller piece of that tax pie that comes from residents. And that would be a number that perhaps the treasurer could share next time around. You know, how many cents on the dollar the municipal government controls versus the provincial versus the federal, because my memory is it's something like 6 cents, so 6 out of 100. But I just think that those numbers are really good to share when people highly analyze what we do and just don't even bat an eyelash with the federal and the provincial, which is multiple times higher than ours. So thank you.
Great points, and I'm sure Jocelyn will bring that forward at the next meeting. Councillor Foster?
Yeah, Your Worship, just two things. I was going to comment on that grant being decreased. Are we still putting a little bit of that away for a rainy day, so to speak, George?
Yes, we are. There is a significant contribution to reserves, and a portion does go into the operating budget.
Good planning. And then the second part, and again, getting back to my grant dependent stuff, when we look at increase in building costs and COVID-19 ads, are some of those covered by the COVID grant we got from the government for maintenance and that kind of stuff?
Through you, Your Worship, yes, they are. Some of them are covered under the COVID grant that we've received, both operating and capital expenditures.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kinney?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just the first comment that yes, Mr. Jennings is doing a fantastic job with communication, but I think that's his forte and he's doing a great job at it. And I thank Mike for that. Just one quick question to our CAO. You mentioned about maintenance in that, and I know, and please correct me if I'm wrong, with regards to increasing the accessibility of town hall for our residents and that, would that some of that be for that, or is that a different item? And are those items grant dependable? If you could respond to that, George, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, to the councillor. Specifically with respect to accessibility improvements to town hall, I'm not aware of anything at this point. I do know that the lift that we have has been discussed. Our deputy clerk is our secretary to the Accessibility Advisory Committee, and she brings forward matters pertaining to accessibility if we need to address them. So I'll be sitting down, as I said, with the facilities foreman. If there's any input from Laura, our deputy clerk, then certainly that'll be incorporated. I can't remember the second part of your question, Councillor.
Okay, just on that note, though, I did see Mr. Rose pop on the screen here, and he may be able to address the question.
Thank you, Your Worship. Excuse me, Mr. CAO. I just wanted to clarify to Councillor Kinney that we do have an outstanding grant application to the accessibility funding, and there were 5 items identified for town hall on that grant application. So yes, there is an opportunity for capital projects for accessibility, and the quick list would be the elevator, number 1. It is the biggest expense that we applied for on that grant. Sliding doors to the east end of the building to upgrade the current push button doors. We also have washroom upgrades downstairs and upstairs. Last but not least, it was accessibility items at the new fire hall build. So that was the item that's not down.
Councillor Kinney, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did, Your Worship, and I thank Chris and I thank George for their input. No, it did, so thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments at this point? Seeing none, I will pass it back.
Thank you, Worship, and thanks, Mr. Roos. That was the second part of the question I couldn't remember. It had to do with the grant, and he had all the information, so that was perfect. So thank you. So we're going to move on to the next slide. There is a request for additional assistance in the HR department. So one of the employees that will be, or proposed employees that will be reviewed as part of the second draft will be an 8-month student for human resources to assist the human resources department. That will be considered, as I said, as part of the second draft. On your slide, you'll see that the doctor recruitment program continues with dollars assigned for that. We talked a little bit earlier about the Conservation Authority. That'll be reviewed leading into the second draft as well. And we have a proposal for a additional security camera down at the beachfront, and that is $12,000. The OPP budget was presented to council at the coordinated committee meeting earlier this month, so that'll be incorporated as part of the second draft. That figure of 5 million is the overall budget. I think the increase is, I think in the budget it shows at 90,000. I think it's going to be less than that based on what the OPP have submitted. And the community policing budget has been removed since the community policing office no longer exists. So your worship, I'll pause there and see if there's any questions on these components of the budget.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Belanger.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a quick question on the policing budget. I know recently we saw where the overtime for the HOI weekend car rally, unsanctioned rally, is going to be 2023, but there were 403 calls for service that weekend, which is close to $60,000. And would that fall into this year's budget, or would that be next year's budget, or because that's a significant amount that was unbudgeted. So if you could answer that, thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. So those calls for service will be averaged over the three-year period. However, before that takes place, there's going to be a reconciliation done by the OPP for the various calls that took place that weekend. There'll be a determination whether those calls fall under the provincial mandate or the local municipal mandate. So that exercise will take place first. But the ones that do end up falling to the municipality, the OPP run on a 3-year rolling average, and that's what will come forward in 2023.
And I did mention at the last meeting when we had our OPP representatives here that further discussion needs to occur on that, because the they wanted to keep them within our boundaries that weekend. So I think that we have a case to be made to say, we kept them here, but is it really appropriate that we take on the full cost of all of that? So that's still a discussion that has to happen throughout that reconciliation as well, I believe, George. And I think you have that on a list to have that discussion.
Yes, Your Worship. Yeah, we'll be meeting with the OPP and discussing that in detail.
Thank you. Councillor Wells.
My mute doesn't seem to be functioning quite the way it's supposed to today. I guess it's having a bad day. George, the issue of community policing budget, I'm concerned about the removal of that budget. I know you said in your presentation that it was because the facility is no longer there, but there was an allocation, and maybe I'm talking about two different budgets. You may be talking about a facility budget, but within the community policing, we had always provided, and Mark will help me out here. He's been involved as long as I have, maybe longer with his past career. There was a budget always assigned to the community policing for community-related projects that came through under the community policing budget. So I'm just not sure why we are cutting it off unless it is strictly a facilities and there is another operating budget somewhere else for community related policing projects. that they can access. And if that's the case, then I'm certainly opposed to that being cut, because I know they haven't been able to meet in the last, well, for the most part, for the last couple of years, but they do engage a great deal within the community in terms of community safety, and they need that funding to operate.
Okay, thank you for that. I was thinking the same thing. George, can you speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, through to the councillor. I think that from the standpoint of community policing, until they reestablish themselves, that any funding can be dealt with under the administration budget, so that if they have any programs that they wish to initiate, certainly they can liaise with my office, and then we'll accommodate them.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Wells.
Thank you for that, George. I've written that down and dated it as a promise. Just to clarify, they have reconstituted themselves. They have now had 2 meetings starting back a couple of months ago, and another one tonight. So they are back reconstituted and fully active.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kinney.
Thank you, Worship. And further to Councillor Wells' question, yeah, there was an extended budget, if memory serves you correctly, and a lot of times it doesn't. So I'll lead to our treasurer on this. I think initially there was a $5,000 budget. Of that, there was maintenance for the building, telephone, which our CEO is correct. They don't exist anymore, but there was in and around $1,300, I believe, set aside for advertisement, and that from the town. And to, again, Councillor Wells, our community policing committee does do a really good job focusing on overall safety in the community. And I must admit that their base funding, like everybody else, is stymied because they do fundraisers. They do not, except for payments from the property auction, get funding from the OPP, which really isn't funding from the OPP. It's the auctions are from property items that are gathered up from the community, so it's actually funding from the community. But that was my rant, so I'll stop there. But I just want to make one more comment about security cameras and how useful they are with making our community safe, and I'm glad that we're moving ahead with installing some more. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there's nothing else, I will pass it back to, oh, sorry, Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't know if George could answer this or not, but when we move to the new policing model, which I assume we're still looking at doing, and there will be a police services board at that point, will that eliminate the community policing part of it? Because I know there's going to be a public component to that police services board, and I believe we will have better dialogue with the OPP, I guess, at that point with that board for maybe concentrating on some efforts and that in certain areas of town, or the speeding, the complaints we've had in certain areas. I'm just asking if that would be one of the benefits that would be having as we go forward. Thank you.
Mr. CAO.
Thank you. So thank you, Your Worship. There's 2 parts to that question. With respect to the Community Policing Advisory Committee, that's a committee that's composed of volunteers. And I'm not that familiar with the new Police Services Act to be able to comment one way or the other whether it would continue or not continue under the new Police Services Board model. Off the top of my head, I can't see why not. It's basically a committee that assists the OPP in some of the activities as has been outlined earlier. With respect to having a police services board in place, yes, the police services board has greater authority than a community policing advisory committee. A CPAC has been that currently exists to provide direction to the OPP with respect to priorities within the community, so enforcement priorities. As been alluded to under CPAC, the members sit there in an advisory role, so they can only advise the detachment commander. But with a police services board model, the board can provide direction in terms of what the priorities are for the detachment. So that's a higher level of interaction with the board.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wells, you're next.
I guess as I sat and thought about it, and I appreciate the fact the CAO has indicated that support can come through his office, but you know, it sort of leaves the community policing committee in that sort of, okay, we have to run to George and beg for funding for maybe an advertisement about community safety or some whatever. I would really like to see the budget for community policing reconstituted into the budget at the very minimum. Take out whatever was the facilities amount, take out whatever was some other extraneous amount. But in terms of, you know, the $5,000 original budget, I don't think more than probably $1,500 or $1,600 of that was anything other than maintenance and so forth. And the remaining 3,000 or so gave them the opportunity to some of the community scholarships that they do, to offer scholarships for students who are going into policing services. To do a lot of advertising, particularly around community safety, winter ice, the roundabouts and so forth. I'd like to see that reconstituted into the budget.
I would agree with Councillor Wells on that.
And then they can go to George for the extra.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd like to see something in there for that group in the next round. Councillor Belanger, you were next.
Thank you, Your Worship. But I think Councillor Kenny might be talking about the same topic, so maybe I'll let him go first, and I have a new topic.
Okay, Councillor Kenny.
Councillor Belanger, I hope I do, but you can always follow up. No, in actual fact, I just want to make a clarification with regards to policing and that. We've mentioned a police board, which hasn't been created yet, but we're hoping will in the future. We have CPAC, which would be the detachment commander, the worships in the jurisdictional area of the detachment, and the CAOs. And then we have the Community Policing Committee, which is a volunteer organization which does support our local OPP detachments. I just want to make that clarification because a lot of times people confuse this CPAC with community policing, and it's totally different animals. Thank you, and go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Belanger.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to maybe get an update on, we have talked a number of times over the years about moving to an OPP contract, and in recent times that was thought to be revenue neutral, whereas in the past it was considerably greater cost. And I don't believe that anything's come back to council yet as to the timelines of investigating that. And just if it is going to be done quickly, then you know, obviously we want to make sure that there is no impact on the 2022 budget.
Mr. CAO.
Thank you, Worship. So the contract is somewhat tied with the establishment of a police services board in terms of defining levels of service. So from the standpoint, when they changed the billing model several years ago, other than the governance structure, the town is receiving the level of policing that it would otherwise receive under a contract. The only difference is that the municipality or the board could specify additional services to be provided, but that would be something that the municipality would have to pay for. So for example, a traffic officer. So if the municipality felt that it was important to have that, then there would be a cost associated with that, and that would be incorporated into the budget. But at this point in time, there isn't a contract, and we'll see how the police services boards roll out, and then we'll get into the discussions about the contracts.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wells.
Yeah, I was just going to say in answer to Councillor Belanger, you may not have been in the session, but about 2 years ago when we last had live meetings with the AMO, there was a whole session on the new police services board with a number of the experts and the ones that were working on it. And the question was directly asked by myself about our thought that we were going to move from Section 5 to a contract policing. And I was told at that time that that was not necessary, nor even would likely not even be considered in the transition to these new boards. That they were doing away with the contract model, the contract versus the Section 5, and moving strictly to these new police services boards. So that may help you understand that at the time we were told that it was a non-starter to begin to look at that at this time.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions or comments at this point? Seeing none, I will pass it back to George.
Thank you, Worship, and I'll toss it back to the treasurer, who's going to introduce our next presentation.
Thank you for your presentation, George. Okay, I'm just going to share the screen here for our next presentation will be provided by our Director of Legislative Services and Clerk, Dina Lundy. So Dina, just give me a second to share the screen. There we go.
We don't see it yet.
Okay.
Jocelyn?
All right, give me a moment, please.
Thank you.
Do we see it now?
Yes, thank you very much. Through your worship and council and members of the public. So I'm here today to present the departmental budget for the Crooks Department, as well as bylaw and parking. On this slide here, you'll see the largest project for the Crooks Department, of course, is the 2022 municipal election. The cost has increased slightly due to the method of election that we are putting forward this year. In addition, now the archives are a standalone facility. The costs for operations of the building have been included. The capital program for the department is fairly small, with an annual interpretive sign for the Historical Advisory Committee and a life cycle computer replacement. Council received a report earlier this year in regards to the new financial model for the cemetery, which now includes tax support. And the trench box was added as a project to support potential winter internments for the cemetery. This project may change for the draft too, as we receive additional feedback from our cemetery ground staff. And in addition, our business licensing revenue is expected to increase as we are in the third year of our phase-in fees. If council would like questions before we go to bylaw, I'm certainly happy to take those now.
Okay, thank you, Dina. I do actually have some. So a local tabloid recently has twisted some details and facts about the process and getting us to where we are today. I know immediately following the last election, you were looking at ways to improve the process for voters. You received a lot of feedback during that election. Council received a report and also passed a bylaw regarding the voting method for the 2022 election, which is different from the past two elections. And I just thought it might be helpful if you could highlight the changes and why you brought this forward for 2022.
Thank you, Worship. Certainly. Both in 2014 and 2018, we used the internet and telephone method for the town of Wasaga Beach. I joined the town in the middle of the 2018 election. I was able to hear the concerns firsthand during that election. Challenges with telephone voting were things such as difficulty hearing, and it wasn't user-friendly for an at-large election, specifically with the candidate race for councillor. where we had 18 candidates and members were choosing 5, you had to go through a lot of listening on the phone to get to your choices. And it was difficult for members of the public to navigate that system. And I think the challenges, as I look back into the 2014 election, post-election report, the challenges were very similar. And during the feedback that I received during that process, I knew that we had to make some sort of change for our 2022 election. So that's when we started looking into what worked and what didn't for this community. The internet voting was very successful in 2014 and 2018. We saw a huge rise in voter turnout based on that method. So it made sense to keep that method. Voters are 85% of voters used the internet voting method, and our numbers went up from I think about 30%, actually 27.4 in 2010, up to 46.5% in 2018. So it was a very successful method to use. So through the research in the past, if we were going to introduce a traditional method of voting, such as paper ballot, you would have to run 2 elections. So clerks were very hesitant to run internet voting plus paper method. So in my research, I found a provider that has a one system approach for both paper and internet voting, which is really important in not only running the election, but getting those results quickly on election night, and with one specific system that could be fully audited. So that is why I brought forward that method for 2022. And I think council was very supportive of that, which I'm thankful for. And I hope that the community has a good experience with both methods that we're going to use in 2022.
Okay, thanks, Dina. And just one other question. There is a small special interest group grumbling that they specifically should have been able to help direct you in the process to move forward. Can you maybe explain for the public who might be hearing things out there why that would be inappropriate?
Certainly, Your Worship. It wouldn't be appropriate to engage a particular group or individuals in the conduct of the next election, as opposed to engaging the entire community and receiving feedback from everyone and making an informed decision and bringing those recommendations to council. The main reason, as I discussed earlier, was to bring forward a different method that was based on the feedback of the electorate that we received in 2018 and from the reporting in 2014.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll open it up for questions, comments of Dina. Seeing none. Okay, and carry on. Oh, Councillor Wells.
Sorry, Your Worship, I couldn't grab the card fast enough. Dina, just a clarification, the archives, $17,000. Is that maintenance and upkeep? Because I know at another point in time, we're going to be discussing a staffing matter around that. Obviously, that 17 does not include any staffing. Am I correct in that?
That's correct, Councillor Wells, and thank you for bringing that up. That's a point I forgot to make for draft 2. So the 17,000 is strictly the operations for the building itself, the building maintenance, the heat, the hydro, those costs. So that's operational costs for the facility itself. And in draft 2, committee approved bringing forward to budget committee the potential inclusion of a 2-year contract position to manage the archives and the volunteers. So that will be discussed in draft 2 with budget committee.
Okay, thank you for that. And seeing no other cards, please carry on.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Next slide, please. This slide just goes through parking revenues and a little fluctuation that we see in 2022. Of course, parking revenues have fluctuated during the pandemic. The increases and decreases seen here are based on budget to actual results over the previous 3 to 4 years and predictions based on activity for the 2022 year. The increase of parking passes is due to the uptake of our new ability to purchase 2 parking passes per household, and we've adjusted projected revenues as a result. And the honk mobile parking is related to a project that I'll discuss on the next slide, but we're expecting some additional revenue due to the on-street parking project, and that's what that 23,000 is for. Next slide. So we're talking about the capital projects on this page. We have the MPA parking lot improvements that Council received a report on recently. This is expected to yield approximately 100 additional parking spaces. And the on-street parking project is a fairly low cost project. Since the establishment of the draft 1 budget, the cost has decreased slightly. We've brought a report back to committee at the last meeting, and we're estimating $6,000. So we'll see that reflection in the draft 2 budget. The intent of this project is to alleviate some of the congestion on the east and west ends with parking in increasing the on-street parking, but also in addition to the parking on potentially the other side of the street where this parking would be available. The bylaw department renovations will assist with physical distancing as well as security and customer service. I know this project has been ongoing for a number of years, so we're glad to bring that forward this year. Computer equipment is our life cycle replacements, and also to assist with our new software for receiving complaints and tracking complaints. The radio equipment is to reduce rental of equipment and to complement the level of summer officer staff we have. And the bulk of this capital cost is from reserve. As indicated on this slide, the starred amounts are 100% from reserve, parking reserve, as well as the building and office renovations. 50% of that will be from the COVID funding reserve. And one additional comment, in draft 2, we'll discuss, as committee approved, the conversion of the animal control officer from a contract position to a full-time ACO, which has a estimated cost of about $7,800 impact. And that concludes my presentation there.
Great, thank you. I'll open it up for questions and comments on that portion. Okay. I'm seeing none. And I think before we pass it back to Jocelyn, we'll just take a quick 5-minute break and come back fresh for the rest of this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. We're live and ready to go.
Thank you. I will pass it back to Jocelyn.
Thank you, Your Worship. At this time, I'll now present the Treasury Department budget, and I'll just share my screen. So I'm going to review both the revenues and the expenses, and some of these items are highlighted on the slide on the screen now. So the Treasury Department provides various financial services to both the public and to internal departments. The main revenues for the Treasury Department include interest and dividend payments that are related to our note receivable with WDI for the hydro. We have penalties and interest on tax accounts. We receive revenues from investment interest and interest earned on bank accounts. We also have user fees such as tax certificates and tax statements. There are grant revenues sometimes and internal transfers from other departments that are supported by the Treasury function. For 2022, the total revenues are budgeted to increase by $182,000. Some of the revenues for 22 are changing. So the dividend payment has gone down from $400,000 to $375,000. The high interest savings account, which is the HISA accounts, overall has declined from $175,000 to $142,000, and this is due to the lower interest rates that are now prevalent in the market. There is a new investment in principal protected notes, which is projected to earn approximately $217,000. We are currently reviewing this new investment with the auditors as to how the recognition of this new investment will be recorded, so that could change in draft 2. The expenditures for the Treasury Department in total are increasing by $46,000 in 22. And the majority of the increase is related to wages and benefits with the standard COLA and step increases. The staffing complement remains status quo. The new software for asset management has been moved forward to 22, and the Treasury Department share is $36,000. As the town absorbs more of the fee charges associated with credit card payments by phone, the interest and service charge cost has increased by $5,000. And for capital, for draft 1, we have a life cycle replacement plan for an envelope stuffer machine. We're currently doing a condition assessment on that unit to see whether or not that will continue in draft 2 or if we'll defer that purchase. Are there any questions on this slide before I move to the next slide on debentures?
Any questions of Jocelyn? Seeing none, go ahead, Jocelyn.
Thank you. And I'll just be a second here and I'll move there. So the debt structure is forecasted to change in 2022. So at the end of 21, the total debenture liability is forecasted at $12,325,000 versus at the end of 2020, it was $13,169,000. The projection for the end of 22 is that the debt will increase to $32,413,000. And this is due to the construction financing debt related to the Main Street Bridge repairs and the new Twin Pad Arena and Library. The present carrying cost of the debt is approximately $1.2 million per year, and this will increase to $1.8 million for 2022. To put this in perspective, the total annual borrowing limit that the province allows the town to carry is $7.8 million per year. That's in carrying cost. And the town is only using 23% of the total available capacity based on our 22 projected debt levels. So the town's financial position will continue to be healthy and strong. And so while this concludes the Treasury draft 1 budget items, there is one other item I'd like to mention for draft 2. There is a proposed staffing change that has a zero budget impact. Our grant writer position has been a 1-year contract position since November 2015. And the proposal is to move this position to a permanent part-time position. So there's no dollar change. However, the change reduces some of the paperwork with annual contracts and also represents the position more accurately as it is required year over year. And a summary of the justification for this change is included in Council's binder. So are there any questions or comments regarding the Treasury presentation?
Thanks, Jocelyn. Just for clarity, staff may mention today different staffing requests that will be coming forward, but the discussion on those will happen during draft 2. Is that correct?
Your Worship, they could have discussions here today if they had questions that they want us to bring forward for draft 2. It might be easier if there's questions because the staff are here presenting, whereas on draft 2, there won't be staff presentations. So I'll leave that to Council's decision if they want to raise questions at this time or ask us to bring forward information in our draft 2 reports.
Okay, I'll just remind council members that if we get into any of the staffing matters that we don't speak specifically about individual staff members. That would be a concern if we started to do that. So I will open it up for questions and comments. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Worship. To Jocelyn, just a clarification, you mentioned about the grant writer and moving it potentially subject to approval to a different type of position, but that it was going to be expense neutral, like there'd be no difference in cost. Yet if it goes permanent, does that not now engage certain benefits that would be cost reflective, or am I missing something?
Through your Worship, there is no changes in the benefits from the temporary part-time contract to the permanent part-time contract. So the status of those benefits is the same as what it is presently. So it is cost neutral.
Thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Bray.
Thank you. And through you to the Treasurer, a number of years ago when this position was created, and I'm fully supportive of a grant writer, there was real belief, I think, when we added it to the budget that this position would more than pay for itself in the number of grants that it brought back into the community. So I just wonder at some point if we could see a report that confirms that yes, this position is one of the few positions that probably pays for itself 10 times over.
Through your Worship, yes, we can address that in our next draft 2. I'll just make mention of that and bring forward some stats on that, and absolutely it does carry itself tenfold. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foster.
Yeah, your Worship, thank you. That was actually outlined in the staffing requests in the blue pages we received in the in-camera thing. I won't go into that. I just wanted to comment about, again, the municipal financing, the position we're in, even because, again, it seems there's people who have been suggesting that we were putting ourselves into a terrible financial position by looking at the arena, library, and other projects. And we're still under $2 million carrying cost looking into the arena and library and that. And as the Treasurer said, we could, according to prudent financial investing by the province, their guidelines say we could do 3.5 times that amount. So I get concerned that people are put out a false narrative from time to time, saying that we're running amok and all this. And then the other part, and I did mention this previously, is when you have a position like a grant writer, you have to look at the town, our reserves, our funding is a big picture. So if, again, we can apply for funding for projects A, B, and C, and if we get funding for projects D, E, and F, it still fills our coffers, that it is to the benefit of the taxpayer. So that's where a position like a grant writer is important. Plus, we also have to have follow-up on our grants to continue to qualify. So they don't just throw money at you. They throw money at you and say, show us how you used it and the timing and all that. So both those things are extremely important. And again, this is our treasurer and previous treasurers too have worked on a very conservative model, and that's why our town is in such good financial position. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I appreciate Councillor Foster's comment on that, because that's very important that money goes to many projects in the community, and it all helps to defer expenses and help with our tax base. And I think the other thing that's important is that on capital projects like this, where you're going to see a building there for 50 or 60 years, or a bridge, or any of these items, that the cost is spread over those years, really, so that the impact is not on the people that live here right today, that it's going to be picked up by new residents that come in the community. All the construction that we're having in the community, people that move here, they're all going to participate in the payment of these community building blocks, and they're going to be here for decades. And it's a fair way of doing it, and it's a conservative way of doing it, and the proper way of doing it to share that load going forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, back to you, Jocelyn.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to just clarify, if I could. I'm just going to share my screen. I just want to clarify that this 22 carrying cost represents about half of the debt for the Twin Pad Arena. And so in 23, we should expect to see that increase. Probably, I'm estimating around another 800,000 carrying costs. So just so everyone's clear, we are getting, it is over a 2-year period that we are implementing the financing for the arena and library. However, we are still well below the carrying costs that is permitted by the province. So I just thought I should clarify that. And if it's fine, I'll move forward with the next presentation.
Yep, please do.
Okay, thank you. And so now I'd like to turn the presentation over to Derek Bowers, our Chief Information Technology Officer. Derek?
Yes. Good morning, and thank you, Your Worship, members of council. So for information systems, the 22 budget operations, we've managed to reduce our managed computer services by $37,000. This has been achieved through evaluation of our service provisions and renegotiating what we required. We've lowered our software license maintenance by $19,000, and that's reflective mostly on the removal of a software that has been in place while we're getting CityView put into place. With regards to corporate operations, we've renegotiated the cell phone rates, so that is down $8,000, and renegotiated our corporate-wide Rogers services, so that's down $2,000. With regards to our corporate software, asset management software that is being put into place in 2022 is $120,000 overall, funded by a provincial efficiency grant. And capital computer lifecycle, we're looking at $43,000. We've taken what the forecast was and tried to break that down so that wasn't as great of an impact on a single fiscal. With regards to the departmental software expenses under operations, the vast majority of that is for our data containment and facility security for the licensing and support, our accessibility compliant software for PDF documents, and for data security with our two-factor solution that we have in place for that. Draft 1 budget, as has been mentioned, does not include staffing, which will be covered in draft 2. The proposal is in the council binder. There is a request in for a computer support specialist to be permanent full-time. This would be 40 hours a week. And for the past 2 years, we've had this position filled under contract. And we have noticed our service levels that we can provide is much higher, shorter response times, less downtime, and it's not a case that we can continue supporting on a single person in the event that somebody is off on leave. So having the two bodies is desired. And that concludes the ITMS draft budget.
Okay, thanks, Derek. Are there any questions at this point from members of council? Councillor Belanger?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Not so much a question, but the investment we're making into software upgrades, although it's not anticipated that there would be necessarily payroll savings, I believe there is a productivity efficiency improvement that will allow the town to grow going forward with investing less payroll as we grow, as if we had otherwise done nothing. My understanding is that this new system offers a lot of enhancements that will save us money and hopefully pay for itself over time. Is that correct?
Derek?
Through your worship, that is correct, Councillor Belanger. The solution that we're putting in place provides a common data set for ownership information and land management primarily, which is utilized by building, bylaw, and planning. And through the use of that, it does increase the level of efficiencies.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Derek.
Thank you.
Jocelyn?
Thank you, Your Worship. Okay, I'll now move to the next presentation. Julianne O'Donnell, Manager of Beachfront Fleet and Purchasing, will present the Beachfront Rental Properties, and I'll just put up the slide for you. Just one moment, please. Okay. Juliana, are you there?
Good morning. Yes. You hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. And here presenting the Beachfront Rental Properties the budget. We have some the Beachfront Rental Income Properties are showing $330,000. It should be noted that these numbers may change in draft 2 as we have updated leases now that have come through, but at the time that the budget one, draft 1, so I should say, was presented, we had some, we have decreased rental income due to the redevelopment of the beachfront here. The section from 1st to 3rd, as we know, is going to be demolished, and those locations are no longer available for rent. There's also an overall increase of $45,000 for tax-supported operating costs and a decrease of $25,000 for tax-supported capital costs. If there's any questions, I'll take them from council at this time.
Okay, questions for Juliano? Okay, seeing none. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll move to the next presentation, which is Fire Emergency Management. The Director of Emergency Services and Fire Chief, Mike McWilliam, will present the next slide, and I'll just load the slide on the screen.
Okay, thank you, Jocelyn, and good morning, Your Worship and members of council. Those are 2 tough facts to follow. Derek's first 4 points had savings, and then Juliano has all the income from the beachfront properties, and I'm just a spender. So I like to change my position in these presentations for next year. Starting with the fire department's operational budget, there's really not much change from year to year here. The standard inflationary increases, as well as cost of living and wage step adjustments, have been included. One item worth noting, the second bullet there, is the land lease agreement with WDI for the property that Fire Station 1 sits on. That land lease agreement commenced in 2011, and as per the terms, was reassessed at the 10-year point to determine fair market rent, which resulted in an increase of $7,500 annually. So you'll see that added from here on. So that assessment will again be done in 10 years' time. So moving on to capital items, there are a few noted. The first is $9,000 for computer and office equipment. This is to replace some IT-related equipment at the fire stations to maintain the life cycle schedule managed by our IT administrator. Suppression equipment, we have $12,000 allocated for the replacement of some damaged and or aged hose, nozzles, and other suppression-related tools and equipment. Under personal protective equipment, a number of sets of bunker gear have just expired or are expiring in 2022. Therefore, $12,000 is requested for the replacement of this gear. You'll see bullet 4, a transfer to reserves in the amount of $155,000 has been included as a capital budget cost, as the fire department has made a couple of large capital purchases that are funded through reserves. Therefore, financing plans have been put in place to replenish those reserves. The contribution of $155,000 represents prior financing of larger purchases, which was the full replacement of our breathing apparatus, as well as the emergency purchase of the pumper. In draft 2 of the budget, the contribution amount will increase to $380,000 with the addition of the $225,000 for the aerial truck. Replacement vehicle, so this is a light duty replacement vehicle in the amount of $53,000. That was included for 2022 as one of the fire department's pickup trucks is past due for replacement with respect to the life cycle schedule that we keep for our small fleet. Our practice in the fire department is to keep a pickup truck in place for 12 years before replacing. We currently have a pickup that is in its 14th year, going into its 15th year. This replacement was pushed in prior years to relieve some pressure on those budgets at that time. And then, of course, the aerial truck, the replacement of the aerial truck was approved by council at a special meeting on October 7th, when a recommendation was brought forward to purchase an in-stock demo unit that would see savings to the town in both time and cost. This was presented early, as this was a great opportunity that would have been lost if we didn't act quickly. The capital asset reserve and the development charge reserve will be used to purchase this vehicle at a cost of $1,365,900. And further to that, as I already mentioned, annual contributions to replenish the capital asset reserve will be made each year in the amount of $225,000 for the next 5 years. Those are the highlights of the 22 capital and operating fire department budgets.
Okay, thanks, Chief. Are there any questions on this presentation? Councillor Kinney?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think there are more comments than questions. I just want to make sure that our community realizes that it's important to abide by life cycles of fire vehicles, especially our aerial truck, our pumper truck, and any assorted other emergency vehicles, just because if they're not in the right range of age, several things happen. They incur more vehicle issues. They're not as safe for the public and or our members. There's an insurance impact that I found out earlier, which I won't go into. The aerial truck made a lot of sense because of the cost savings. And it's a cost savings because we as a community needed that truck. So we had to get it as quick as possible. And our chief mentioned about pickup trucks. And I remember a conversation I had with him several years ago, the importance of having a pickup truck with proper lights on it to tow your boat. Because if you don't have that, you won't get through traffic because nobody moves over unless you've got red and blue flashing lights. That being said, Your Worship, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, thanks, Chief. Back to you, Jocelyn.
Thank you, Your Worship. Okay, and thank you, Chief. Our next few slides will be presented by Chris Roos, Director of Recreation, Events and Facilities, and I'll just put the screen share back on.
Morning, Your Worship, members of council. The next few slides relate to operations, and then following that, capital planning for the 2022 budget related to the Recreation, Events and Facilities Department. A number of new programs have been developed, and Stroller Fit is one that jumped out. This is an outdoor program, and it hadn't been offered in our area for some time. We're trialing it under the new programs line this fall, and we have a number of sessions planned for next year, starting in the spring, as it will be always outdoors. The second notable item in the recreation area is the subsidy to minor hockey. We have, for many, many years, held a standard subsidy for both figure skating and hockey. And we're looking out to the next 3-year fee scheduling. As many members of council may remember, we often bring out fields, ice, and room bookings on a 3-year schedule that typically has about a 3% increase. That will come out next year, and it will plot the rental costs for the 2023 minor hockey season, the 2024, and the 2025. This subsidy that we are gesturing towards today in the operating budget will be proposed in draft 2 to council in a specific report relating to rates and fees to no longer be doled out at 50% until it expires, so more or less a flat rate. But we are anticipating more and more ice purchasing in the years to come, especially when the new Twin Pad Arena opens up. And the proposal, which is based on this minor increase, it formerly had been $18,000. Today, we are talking about $22,000 for minor hockey, is based on a consistent 21% per hour that they rent. And this is consistent with the figure skating group as well. And this will become a floating rate. And if they rent more ice, they will get a little bit more subsidy from us, but it will be formally addressed in our rates and fees after we implement this in 2022. So next slide, please, Jocelyn. So events. This is a amalgamation comment here at the very beginning. We've pulled together more or less an administration section, a community event section, and an external event section, so that staffing and administrative costs are all in one now. And we still, as you can see in your budget binders, break out some of the larger specific events. But today I'll give you a number of highlights. First and foremost, we will be bringing forward a COVID-19 plan. As most will remember, in late November, we did bring forward a budget, and we are definitely contracted over the past 2 fiscal years, and should the restrictions relating to COVID-19 continue in 2022, we will have a backup plan that should bring significantly lower costs relating to special events if there are restrictions around gatherings. So that is in our plans. And ideally, some of that money can be set away in reserves so that when the time comes that we can return to our larger big activations, that there will be money there to help the budget smooth back in. Beyond that, there are a number of small events highlighted here. Overall, as you heard from the treasurer at the beginning, the net on the special events group is down 13K, but Christmas Through Town, which had been a new event idea when we had restrictions around COVID and the Santa Claus Parade last year, was well received, and it's planned in the budget for 2022. Pumpkin Trail expense has also been formalized and won't be taken out of our new event line anymore. The next 2, Wasaga Sundays and the patio music program. These were initiatives also brought up to support local businesses, and we formalized the budget. And last but not least, Rock in the River. This was a new event that I think is well received. We had 88 boats, and who knows, 880 would be fabulous a decade from now, but we think it's a great highlight for the paddling sports in Wasaga Beach and the Nottawasaga River, and we intend to make it a standard in the next slide, please, Jocelyn.
Sorry, you keep cutting out there, Chris. You're done your presentation for now. We can open it up for questions.
No, there are still 3 more slides. Would it be best to stop at each slide otherwise, Mayor Fulci?
Yeah, maybe we can catch up now to the ones that you've done. And I don't know if it's when you're turning, but you keep cutting out on my end here anyways. I would just say as far as the hockey subsidies and skating and things like that, I look at these groups as volunteer parents who put in a lot of time and effort to run sports on behalf of the town. If we had to do that, you know, we certainly couldn't do it for the money that we subsidize them with. And I mean, they do bring in revenue as well by organizing that. So I'm fully supportive of that. I would just say that when it comes to external event sponsorship, I've noticed recently this year, there was one music event where, you know, the town wasn't recognized, and, you know, other people's sponsorship banners were plastered everywhere and things like that. And I think we need to remember that these are taxpayers' dollars when we contribute to things. So if the town is sponsoring, and I think proper recognition needs to be put out there. So moving forward, I would hope that that would be a requirement and that we make sure that that happens. Other than that, I will open it up to others. Deputy Mayor Bray.
Thank you. Just to add on to the mayor's comments about subsidies for hockey and for figure skating, fully support that. These are municipal facilities that have been paid for by tax-paying resident dollars. But I would also like to see some consideration given to groups such as the Air Cadets, such as the Lions Club, you know, Canucks, different people that are looking to rent space. We had Girl Guides in here a couple of weeks ago looking for support. We have these facilities, they often sit empty after hours. And, you know, when I see the subsidy coming through for hockey and for figure skating, again, these things are precedent setting. So, and I know that we reduce the rates and there's a number of factors involved, but in an effort to be fair to all, I think we do need to look at all users of our facilities so that they are treated fairly. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Your Worship. And to build on what the Deputy Mayor was saying, the other thing we have, and Chris alluded to it, is we're going to have a bigger facility coming on board. And I would actually hate for it to have dark times. I want it to be, you know, I want staff to be running off their feet to deal with the demand for it, so that we see the, you know, that it's generating revenue and activity and exercise for the entire community at all times, or as much as possible, right? Having dark days is, with the exception of maintenance on a rink or something, everything should be we should be trying to have it programmed as much as possible. Your Worship, also, I'm just going to point out, as Chris goes on, there's 2 other places later on in the presentation where either the Friends of Nancy Island or Wasaga Under Siege is mentioned. I didn't declare a conflict of interest because I'm no longer involved in either of those or in that organization. So if people are wondering why I declared previous years and not that, I'm no longer on the board. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. And seeing no other cards, Chris, you can carry on.
Okay. Yes, and further to your comments, Mayor Fulci, as well as the deputy, regarding community groups, you're correct in referencing this Girl Guide discussion, and we as a department do intend to bring forward a discussion on this for council with the rates and fees that relates to all things, and perhaps give some more direction to staff as we look forward to that community group rates 3-year approval that will be built in 2022 for budget. So going on now, external events, a few of the highlight ones. Of course, we hope that we can bring all of these back These are sponsorship numbers, so expenses from the town. The motorcycle rally, Saga Under Siege, that was mentioned by Councilor Boston just now. The Wasaga Beach Cruisers, Stonebridge, Wasaga Beach Blues, and there's a reduction here. This 35 had been 55 in previous budgets, and that 20,000 relates back to the Rock on the River and the Pumpkin Trail ideas. I should mention here too, further to Mayor Byfolchi's comments about ensuring that the town is shown as a key sponsor and that we are putting money out to these external groups to run events. You'll see moving forward that we have capital monies as well to highlight on our large portable event stage. And we intend to buy banners, and there was a signage initiative that ideally we can take advantage of at a number of more events, so that people are aware that the town is trying to help bolster these special events that are geared towards tourists. At any rate, recreation, it goes without saying that my group has worked very hard to be creative, and I can't say enough about how we've been learning to entertain people outside and online and come up with fresh ways to keep our numbers alive. And the staff has done very well at that. We learned early on, as you may remember, I think we were one of the first to announce a day camp, and we did that to try and support local families getting back to work when kids were out of school, and there were no programs in the summer, but it turned out quite successfully, and we have an increased plan for next year. We do have good traction, and the safety guidelines, I think we started out with 6 kids per leader, and the numbers are becoming more realistic, and it's not a lost leader program. So summer camps will stay in the recreation department in 2022. Next slide, please, Jocelyn. So capital, definitely there's been lots of discussion, and we have close to 50% of the future Twin Pad Arena and Library project being built out. Another part of our larger project budget relates to furnitures and fixtures and equipment. It stands to reason that some of that money will start to flow near the end of 2022 as we start to pre-order furniture and equipment that will ultimately bring into the new facility. A number of small projects as well, ongoing maintenance at the Recplex. We have a large insulation plan that will likely finish out once we see how the ice situation improves this coming winter. We also have equipment. This tool drawer unit is the interior furnishing of a facility van that's on order. At the youth center, we have improved outdoor lighting and soffits. Our medical center is a little bit vulnerable with aluminum soffits, and the lighting is this traditional institutional orange stuff. And we want to make it nice and comfortable for the youth and the neighbors in the area. And so those are some standard upgrades that we are looking at outdoors. We also intend to work with a landscape architect and try and plot out the rest of our outdoor space there. The courts that have been built at the back have been well received in the parking lot, and there's some front lawn activity that we've had these tetherball things that are well done, but we want to have a bigger plan so that it's done strategically. A bocce ball court is something that we think older adults who also use that facility regularly may take advantage of, and we just want to come up with a full plan for the entire property, and that is a small $8,000. Any questions on that? I'm sorry I jumped a slide without referring back to you, Mayor Byfolchi.
That's okay. Councillor Kinney.
Thank you, Your Worship, and we can tell, Chris, that you're excited about what you're doing, and you should be. One of the things I want to just highlight is the fabulous job that you guys did with our skateboard facility, with the murals and the fall competition, and I hope that will continue on because I think it's a good extension from our youth center and good initiatives with regards to keeping our youth active in a positive sport. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wells?
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't know what the right point to introduce this, so I'll just do it now because we've just talked about external events to which the town is providing funding. 3,000 to Car Rally, 3,000 to something, 5,000 to the bikes, 15,000 to the Stonebridge Music Festival. And maybe I'm in the wrong, but I'm not sure if we are requiring, and if we are not, I believe that very strongly we should be requiring at the end of any of these events a complete and fulsome financial statement. This is taxpayer dollars that's being handed over to be expended by the various groups. And I don't know what accountability we have in place for those fundings. So it's my view that at the end of any event that has taxpayer funding, there should be a complete and fulsome financial statement which shows all sources of revenue from all sponsors in terms of dollars, as well as all sources of support in terms of in-kind, with the evaluations of the in-kind amount, what it would reflect if you had to go out and purchase it, and a sort of a net revenue stream and a net expenditure stream to justify and to show moving forward how this event is helping the town, but also that the dollars and cents are being properly accounted for.
Absolutely. Chris, did you wish to speak to that?
Certainly. I don't know that we've ever done a follow-up statement, but it's a good idea so that we understand exactly how successful or unsuccessful these sponsorship dollars from the taxpayer base, as you mentioned, Councillor Wells, work. One thing I will mention is that when we do propose sponsorship, there is an event budget that is brought to council, and that has been a traditional to date. I don't know if we have policy on that, but I can verify with our senior special events coordinator and ensure that this type of background reporting to more or less summarize to say what was the bang for our buck if we did 5 or 10 events in a year, and to give follow-up reporting officially as a requirement to these groups before we intend to sponsor them. That is a good initiative to introduce.
Well, and I think we can also gauge, is this something that is for our locals, or is this something that's bringing in other people to the area from a tourism standpoint? I think if we can get as much information as possible, that would be great. I saw Councillor Wells, then Councillor Foster, then Deputy Mayor Bray.
Thank you. Just in response to Chris, and I appreciate, yes, the budgets are brought forward in the beginning, but then we just don't seem to follow up and hold the people accountable, as well as ourselves accountable for the monies that are being put forward and put out there. And as the mayor has said, I think we also need to know when we sponsor events, how much of that is, I'm not sure how you measure it, it'd be difficult, but how much of that is going to support our regular local taxpayer base, but also just the outside tourism, because it's important to draw tourists in.
Thank you. Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Your Worship. And again, I applaud Chris and his people for the number of events they're dealing with or trying to promote, and for the general well-being of the town. He mentioned, perhaps this bocce ball court, which is a low cost entry, low cost of entry to do something. I was with someone from the GTA the other day who pointed out, and this is just to put in your hopper for the future, Chris, that right now the hottest growing sport in the GTA is actually cricket. It's taking off. So at some point, what tends to happen down south tends to migrate up here a bit. I don't know if that's ever been in the hopper at all, but it might be something just to keep an eye on for future budgets. Again, we have, as we diversify our population, we have to provide events and options that may be used more in different cultures and that as we diversify. So just a thought while we're chatting. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. Deputy Mayor Bray?
Thank you. Just a further comment on Councillor Wells' suggestion about the event budget follow-up. I know if you apply for a grant through the finance department, through our annual grants budget, it's quite an extensive application, and there is that requirement to provide previous year's financial results, and as well as a plan for what you're going to be doing with the grant. So it might just be something to somehow blend those two together so that you have groups accessing one set of grants, not both sets of grants.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, back to you, Chris.
Okay. Councillor Foster, it is in the hopper. We do know about cricket, and we do know that we've got a big tourist base coming up from the 905s in Greater Toronto, where cricket is very popular. And I'm not sure where it fits yet, but it could be a tourist draw for us. I see it as a great special event, like we run softball tournaments. Could we set up a cricket event or an event space for people to just use basketball? At any rate,
sorry,
final
Chris.
page.
Sorry, Chris, I just saw Councillor Watson's card go up.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not sure if we can do this or not, or we should be, but I get very disheartened, I guess, when the town puts forward monies to support community events, yet the reaction from the organizers themselves, Your Worship, you mentioned about one event in particular where we donated or provided serious dollars to the event, and we get overlooked or with it. And I guess I would call this social media auditing, what Councillor Wells brought up, the financial part of it. But we know what we do as a town to support these things, and then the organizers themselves come back and trash council, quite frankly, for it. So I don't think that's fair, and I don't know if we can look into that as one other component, because it's out there, and it's not correct with what's happening. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think if we're giving taxpayers dollars to a group, then we want to make sure that it's a reputable group who's representing the way we would want the town to be represented. I can't agree with you more. Okay, Chris, back to you for your last slide.
Yes, so a couple more small capital items to be listed. We have a few items for special events. Aforementioned, we have the 4 banners that we can put up at events where the town is a sponsor. Certainly we'll build some for the sides of the stage as well as on fencing areas around special events. Outdoor screen replacement. We've done these movies for many years now down at the beachfront, and it gets pretty windy some nights. At any rate, that unit is tired, and it's an inflatable cloth screen, and it's time to upgrade to a new unit. And last but not least, generator and vandal-proof electrical hookups. We've got a tough group who likes to bug us at our Oakview Woods outdoor stage at the gazebo, and we need something better there to plug in for Jazz at the Park, as well as a small silent battery generators are becoming better and better, and we've been trialing those with this Rock in the River, and it's a nice feature so that we don't have a generator whirring in the background. So this is a proposed in this $8,000 electrical hookup project. And last but not least, there are some fleet considerations which will be covered by the fleet manager. Very last, it's not listed in the 2022 draft 1, but there are staffing considerations in councillors' budget binders. The Recreation Events and Facilities Department does have a number, and I will just take a moment to summarize so that folks are ready, so that we can have a more deliberate discussion about these when the numbers are put into the draft 2. First and foremost, our recreation programmer, it is the highest cost proposal, and like always, our department uses a number of part-time positions, and we're working to solve some attrition issues and to stabilize a number of departments. In a nutshell, in making a recreation programmer full-time, a permanent full-time position is proposed at 40 hours a week. We intend to, number one, increased recreation programming supports. This individual will work evenings, and we are looking out to bigger scheduling between 3 different sites. We know that by 2023, 2024, we're going to be programming in the evenings and weekends, especially at the Sunnydale Trails new space at the elementary school, as well as the Twin Pad Arena Library. Secondly, we will use this position to support shifts at the youth center. And we blended some of that funding that was in a former position at the youth center to support this recreation programmer. Third, we are going to be supporting seniors active living. We know that the East End will be an attractive spot to run some programs. And the idea is to always have a staff person available at the West End, at the youth center / seniors active living center. And this person will be used there as well. Last but not least, the customer service desk. It's actually a second part of this proposal in your binders, but our 2022 plan would include keeping the desk open until 8 p.m. 5 days a week at the Recplex. And in order to have a complete coverage at that front desk, 12 hours a day for those 5 days a week, we are proposing 2 permanent part-time staffing positions. They'll typically work about 4 4-hour shifts, either early in the morning or into the evening. And we can fill out our staffing group in preparation for the future Twin Pad Arena, where we are considering a 7-day front desk staffing. And this helps us to start to build our team with 2 small permanent part-time positions. And that is the first of 3. It has tax impact. The other 2 proposed positions are related to special events. The first one is a 0 tax impact. We currently in our budget have 2 temporary contract part-time special event assistants. And what we are proposing is 1 permanent part-time special event assistant. So no change in duties or wages, but we've struggled in that department to keep the same person year over year. The idea was that we could perhaps have 2 assistants overlap from the spring into the summer and then the summer into the fall, but it hasn't worked out for us since that was trialed. And the idea is to make 1 permanent, and we may be a little bit flexible and use more hours in the summer and less in the shoulder seasons. But this has a 0 cost impact to the town. It's just a better way to administrate that special events assistant. And then last but not least, a discussion between the treasurer and I, and you have heard in my presentations also that we will set money aside in special events where we've contracted over the past 2 years because of COVID. And there are reserves available to support a 1-year special events programmer. This is a return to a position that was terminated last year. We want to hope for the best, that we're back to normal special event opportunities. We currently have 51 different ideas in our hopper and hoping that we can push them all out. Conservatively, we have a scheduled costing around staffing resources, and it would seem that the 2 staff plus 1 part-time person cannot support a full schedule next year. And it's proposed to use some of our reserves from 2020 and 2021 special event budgets that were contracted to fund a 2022 programmer for a 1-year contract. So that concludes everything that you'll see in draft 2, 2022, or that's here for you today in draft 1, unless there are further questions.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Any questions for Chris at this point? Seeing none, thanks, Chris. And back to you, Jocelyn.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I just have, just give me a moment, please, for sharing the screen. Okay, our Our next presenter is for the library, and that will be presented by Pam Pell, our Director of Library Services CEO.
Good morning, Your Worship and members of Council. The Wasaga Beach Public Library Board and staff have drafted a budget that we believe addresses current community needs, as well as the library's ongoing planning process for the opening of a new facility in 2023. The more notable operational expenditures include the following. The library has requested $9,000 to pay for the development of a new website. The current site, launched in 2014 as part of a grant-funded project initiated by the Simcoe County Library Cooperative, not only has dated aesthetics, it has poor functionality, as well as some accessibility issues. The site host and platform offer very limited opportunities for improvement, so we're looking at developing something all new. The new site will better address modern sensibilities and accessibility needs. We believe that now is the time to have it developed for us. We need an exciting new library. It should have a website that successfully highlights the extensive programs, services, and resources available for the community. Also, in our 2022 draft budget, the library is seeking $30,000 to perform a rebranding exercise. The Wasaga Beach Public Library Board would like to ensure that the library's branding properly highlights how dynamic the library is today and will be in the future. The board is interested in potentially changing the library's name to draw more interest and users to the new building. Although the library name is enviably strong as a brand, it is also somewhat stereotyped in that it is not really reflecting what libraries offer in communities. There are libraries in Ontario that have changed their working names, such as the Innisfil Idea Lab and Library, the Cambridge Idea Exchange, and they have been tremendously successful with these changes. Staff will be seeking grant funding to support this rebranding initiative. Also in operations, the Treasury Department has built $350,000 into the 2022 operational budget as a phase-in for the new library's projected operational costs to help smooth taxation in upcoming years. Highlights of the library's capital budget include a request to carry over $5,000 for the installation of a window in the former archives room. This renovation was planned for 2021, but it was delayed due to a general contractor issue. Funds for the work were originally obtained through the provincial COVID grant monies to assist the library with developing safer workspaces for staff. The library board is requesting $19,000 to initiate phase 1 of an RFID collection conversion process, including the installation of RFID security tags and workstations. Staff intend to utilize RFID technology to help improve efficiency as the library moves into a new, larger facility. The RFID hardware and software will help staff better manage predicted increases in collection size, visitors, and circulation. The technology will enable the library to provide self-checkout stations, faster check-in and checkout processes, as well as collection inventory and control. Staff recently submitted an application for a Province of Ontario Municipal Modernization Grant to help pay for this project, which is expected to cost upwards of $40,000. The library's 2022 Draft 1 budget also includes $9.7 million for the construction of the new library, scheduled to open in 2023. Construction of the building is now underway. The capital funding was obtained through loan proceeds, reserves, discretionary reserves, DC reserves, and other reserves. Not written in the slide, but under conversation for Draft 2 are some staffing changes at the library. One will be discussed in closed session. The other request is for a new permanent part-time community relations assistant. This new 28-hour-per-week position will assist with the library's extensive list of communication needs and establishing relationships with community organizations. As the library submitted explanation outlines, the community relations assistant will be involved in everything from developing content for the library's social media and websites to collaborating with local organizations to identify gaps in local service provision. This role is important because the library does so many amazing things for the community. In the start of 2021, leading up to the end of September, that's 272 days. The library offered 353 programs to the community. Add into that the thousands of new magazine titles that we offer digitally, the thousands of online training opportunities we offer digitally, our digital subscriptions to things like Ancestry, databases, and also our e-borrowing collection. And then you take a look at what we offer in-house and the number of items that we have available to the community that are more than just books. We introduced Wi-Fi hotspots this year, an additional group of tablets to be borrowed, as well as some fantastic new creator space equipment, including sound equipment, video equipment, and photography equipment. So there's so much that the library offers that we need to ensure that the community knows about it. With this new employee in position, the CEO will be able to reallocate a number of tasks in order to better support increased planning and administration needs associated with changes in accounting procedures, records management, and the move to a new, larger facility. More information about this position is included in the Council's 2022 budget binder. As well, the Library and Recreation Department are seeking to expand the one-year contract for the Twin Pad Arena and Library's fundraising coordinator. The fundraising coordinator has already helped draw significant sponsorships to this project, but there are still many sponsorships available, and we believe that this individual will help us secure those monies for our project. So that includes the highlights of the proposed Wasaga Beach Public Library budget. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Pam. Councillor Foster, did I see your card up?
It was going to be, I was just playing with it earlier, but that's fine. Your Worship, when I'm seeing this, I think, and again, I know it's the same with the arena part of this. This library is, we have to hit the ground running on this. So this budget reflects the ability to get stuff moving and ahead. We can't just open the doors to have an empty library and no one, not the right people to do it. So I do think this is a necessary step to move forward. So I just thought I'd throw in my support for this as proposed so far. I know we have to work through it some more, but I do think that this is an opportunity to make this new building on both the library and the arena side and public space, make it completely effective for our town right from the get-go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor Bray.
And thank you, just to support Councillor Foster's comments. This is our one chance to get it right, and I think it's not something we're going to be able to do overnight, so we do need to gradually build up so that we are ready on day one. Just a really small comment on the website. I know the library is looking to redevelop their website, and I know the town has just been through a very extensive project to update our website, so I'm not sure if there could be some shared learnings or savings, or maybe our platform can be expanded to incorporate the library. But if you're starting from scratch, $9,000 isn't a lot of money, but if you're maybe using some of what's already been developed, you might get a bigger, better bang for your buck. So that was my only comment, was maybe we could work together.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kinney.
Thank you, Your Worship, and to Pam. No, I'm total support of what my peers have mentioned about how important the library is, and the website is so important, or just straight communication, because as you had mentioned, Pam, you get stereotyped as a library, but no, it's more than a library now. It's a learning center, it's a library, it's a investments. It just goes on and on what a library could be. And again, maybe we can help out with website. And then I picked up on the branding. I know the town's going through a branding journey also, so maybe there's some interconnection, or maybe there's not, but just a thought I'd mention it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Belanger.
Thank you, Mayor Byfolchi. Pam, maybe it's incorporated somewhere in here, but I know we really have to stretch our memories to think about prior COVID. But the library had done a number of programs and bus trips with, I think, primarily seniors. And I can remember having conversations where they often sold out very quickly, and we were only able to accommodate people for one bus, and there was demand for much more. I'm not quite sure where those dollars are incorporated into the budget, but I know that was at the time something we were looking at to expand, and it is like libraries have become community centers, and it's both internal and external programs. And I just wanted your thoughts on that, and know if any money's been incorporated to continue on with those kind of programs. Thank you.
Thanks. Pam?
Through you, Your Worship. Councillor Belanger, certainly we plan to return to offering trips. Of course, COVID had a big impact on not only closing a lot of the cultural facilities, but also has deterred many people from wanting to be in a bus with other individuals. So the money for that, our program money, was expanded to accommodate those trips, and we will continue to wait for the opportunity to run those trips again. So we do have that in mind, and we are scanning our environment to see when that might be feasible to restart again. But we felt those were highly important to the seniors, especially in our community, opportunities for them to not have to face city traffic on their own and see sites and experience things that otherwise they could not. So certainly it's on our radar and it's in our plan as long as we can carry it out due to COVID.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is just a question or comment on the fundraising side. I was very happy to hear, is it called Tip Tap, I think, where you go and swipe a card or your credit card, I guess, to donate to the library and arena. I thought that's a brilliant idea. You may have this in place now, I'm not sure, but it was just so that we can reach all of the population. And I go back to your current library, you have a wall of bricks in there that people had donated to when that library was built. And at that time it was $100 to buy a brick, and it was a very successful fundraiser. And I'm just looking to make sure we hit all of the population, people that can afford $100 or $200, and that's so we have a full gamut of opportunities for people, that we don't miss out on that. If you already have it, that's great, or you're going to roll it out. But if not, I would suggest that we try and get that out there and allow small amounts, medium, and big amounts that we've already attracted. Thank you.
Thank you. And that actually has been a discussion with the fundraising coordinator about the buy a brick. So hopefully we'll see that come forward soon. Are there any other questions or comments for Pam? I just had one that maybe you can bring in the next rollout, unless I missed it in the our binder here. The bookmobile. If we can just have an update at some point as to how that's going. We see it throughout the community. We see it parked places. That obviously comes with an expense. And I'm just wondering how many people we're reaching. You know, I don't see a lot of people at it when I have seen it. So just if we can have an update as to how many people it's reaching, and do we need to look at doing anything different with that program? And with that, if there's nothing else from anyone, thank you, Pam, and I will pass it back to Jocelyn.
Thank you, Your Worship. Okay, I'll bring up the next presentation. We now have a few slides from our Director of Planning and Economic Initiatives, Doug Heron. So just give me a moment to share the slide.
Thank you. Good morning, Your Worship and members of Budget Committee. There are a number of planning projects, planning studies planned for the next year's budget. The official plan update, which has been going on for a little over 2 years, there will be a carryover to complete that by next year. Staff intend to have a first draft before council to look at before this Christmas. The West End Secondary Plan study, that's also a study that had been proposed for earlier this year. Then we're carrying it over to next year. The importance of that study is that the West End is under pressure for development, and we are seeing comments come from residents in the West End. So this West End Secondary Plan study is a good opportunity for those residents to give us some input on their opinion for growth in the West End. The comprehensive zoning bylaw update is a natural update that would follow the official plan update, so that both documents basically coincide in the development and policies and the application of policies. There's a growth node study, and similar to the downtown study, when we update the official plan, there are 4 other growth nodes: Old Moseley Village, Schoonertown, 45th Street, and the roundabout or the West End. The official plan would create the boundaries for those growth nodes, but the growth nodes study would actually create policies for each of those nodes. And why that's important is Old Moseley Village, the character is very, very different than 45th Street. And then last but not least, there's the affordable housing proposal study, which is a carryover. And this relates to one of the very early goals of council to look at affordable housing and to build on the 2012 report. Council also directed staff back in March of 2019 to apply some community improvement plans that could provide incentives for affordable housing. So that study would look at those. Of those 5 studies, from a planner's perspective, it's all very exciting. And then in terms of staffing, there is one change. We have had a staff who has been on parental leave, is scheduled to return in January of 2022. Rather than hire a contract planner, we have hired a planning consultant to fill in for the past year and a half. So the monies that currently are in the planning consultant budget line would return to regular wages and benefits for when that planner returns. Albeit there is $15,000 that we intend to retain for the planning consultant, and it's normal that we do that. We often reach out for information that we don't hold in-house, like urban design advice. Staff had previously reported to committee back in September 16th on 3 proposed staffing adjustments. All 3 of them have taxation impacts. The first one is for the hire of a brand new position, a manager of planning. And that position would equate to $41,266 increase in the tax budget. And that's because there's also an EDO position, which staff are proposing not to fill, and the money saved from the EDO would be transferred over to the manager of planning cost. There's also a zoning administrator change from value group 6 to a planner value group 7. And the intention there is to, rather than have focused job duties, that each of the staff would be very amenable in what they could do. And so to create a more viable department. And then finally, with the recommendation to not hire an economic development officer, the summer months are very busy. And what we are proposing is the hiring of a summer student EDO to help out with the one remaining EDO over the summer months. And that's a quick synopsis of the planning budget for next year. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Okay, thank you, Doug. I'll open it up for any questions from council members. Oh, seeing none, you can carry on, Doug.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so I believe, Doug, are you completed?
No, there's economic development yet.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. So in terms of major operations costs for economic development, the single largest line item for economic development is tourism partnerships. On the slide, there's the South Georgian Bay Tourism membership fee. That's currently at $15,000. I understand that there is an ask from that agency for an increase, and there would be a report coming forward from the EDO at the next available meeting, and they're asking for an increase to $25,000. That increase should not affect the $70,000 budget line item. The second bullet here is the Nancy Island Visitor Center. There has not been a lot of work on that one, and probably more importantly, there are other partnerships that are not listed here that take precedence. For instance, RTO 7 partnerships. They assist us with photo shoots and video shoots that we use for advertising the town. We already have a winter scened video and photo shoot scheduled for this winter. And then there's Simcoe County Tourism Projects and Chamber of Commerce programs. And a good example of that one was Wasagalicious, which occurred this summer. So that's the type of partnership where those funds would go to. The town branding project is something that is, it would be applied broadly in terms of how we project the town through various venues. For instance, we have the wayfinding project coming on, and there will be signs installed, and the branding would be installed at the top of the signs. Staff would also be using branding for as we reach out through the economic development approach to bring new investment into town. There's costs for economic development initiatives, and that's follow on from the economic development study and long-range plan. There are 5 different items that are projected for next year. Each of them has a cost, which is within the $40,000. And some of them are the incubator space feasibility study, the Proud to Be Wasaga Beach program, and there are a number of other ones, but it's all about building on the economic development initiatives. The development agreements incentives, those are tied to the downtown, the current downtown CIP incentives. So there is an area of CIP incentives that extend along Main Street from the bridge up to about Wood Avenue, where there are incentives, and that money is to be applied to those incentives. And finally, the facade improvement program. We have seen an uptake this year in the request for facade improvement. The EDO advises that we have requests for projects for next year. So the request is for $10,000. Typically, the award per project is $2,000. And there's a quick synopsis for committee on the economic development budget.
Okay, thanks, Doug. Any questions on the economic development? I'm seeing none. Thank you, Doug. And back to you, Jocelyn.
Thank you, Your Worship. Doug, I think we have one more slide, and that would be the capital.
Thank you, Jocelyn. So the capital for planning, up until recently, we had a $2,000 budget for furniture and equipment, but with the recent retrofit and the request to reduce the tax burden for this year, that $2,000 has been removed from the planning budget, although we still have a $2,000 budget item in there, and that is for computer and office equipment. And then finally, with economic development, there's $100,000 installed for wayfinding signage. So this fall, there's a program to install signage at key major intersections. And the intention with the $100,000 for next year is to provide for subsequent signage. And it's all related to the recommendations that came out of the wayfinding study.
Thanks, Doug. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off early there.
That's okay.
Councillor Kinney.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I don't know if Doug can answer this question, but you mentioned the wayfinding signs. I think it's a great initiative. I'm just wondering when we're going to start seeing some of those signs pop up, or do you have that knowledge? Thank you, Your Worship.
Doug?
Thank you, Your Worship. We anticipate that there will be some signs installed this fall. The work is going on. We're working with Public Works, and there is, when you look at the wayfinding study, it recommended a tier of signs, meaning higher directional signs, and then signs that would be placed at different lower tier intersections. And it was all about guiding tourists and residents to the major commercial areas and the major tourism areas, including the town facilities as well. So the $100,000 would be for planning and install of a second tier of signs to complement the ones that go in this fall.
Councillor Kinney?
Thank you for the redirect, and I apologize. I never thought of this until you mentioned it, Doug. Are we engaging Mr. Jennings for a rollout of these new signs? Because I know people won't recognize them right away. Just my thoughts on advertising them.
Doug?
Through you, Your Worship, we certainly can and should do that. I would add that I'm going to bring it back to branding. So the signs would, we're looking for grants from RTO 7 for the signs. So they would have a certain format that complies with the RTO 7 format. But on the top of each sign, we're looking to install a little banner, and that would reflect the town branding. That would be something that we would be adding at a later date. And certainly with regard to Michael Jennings, that he's helping the staff with the branding, so it makes sense that he would also help the staff advertise the new signs.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wells?
Thank you, Your Worship. Doug, if I heard you correctly, South Georgian Bay Tourism Association is requesting from 15 to plus an additional $25,000 going forward. Did I hear that correctly? And if so, where is the justification for that coming forward? I have not seen anything about that in the past, and I really need to understand the level of services we're receiving for what we're paying already. I know we just kind of recently got into this organization, and all of a sudden it sounds to me like we've suddenly become a cash cow. So I really need to see, before we get into that discussion, I really need to see a comprehensive justification for any kind of increase to that extent.
Doug?
Thank you, Your Worship. And to Councillor Wells, the $25,000 would be a cap. So currently, the current budget is approved this year for $15,000. They're asking for an increase to a maximum of $25,000 for next year. The rationale is based on the change of how they provide services and that it be more equitable to all businesses. About 3 years ago, staff approached council, and at that time, the service they provided was almost a fee per service. So the local businesses had to pay to gain representation from that committee. Council asked them if they could change that they represent all businesses equally. And my understanding is this request for an increase dovetails with that approach to how they deliver their service. The report that should be coming forward probably at coordinated committee in November would provide a much greater description of that justification.
Okay, great. Did you have a follow-up, Councillor Wells?
Yeah, I just, as I said, I need a justification for that increase in expenditure. It's not insignificant. I need to know, what services they have actually provided and over the past period of time. that justifies going for this kind of an increase.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Belanger.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think you sort of answered my question, Doug, but just for clarification, when we were looking at the wayfinding signage, I think all of council was very excited about that. It was very professional, very well done. But we did have the question of how we would be incorporating the tourism branding with the Starburst. And so if I heard you correctly, they're still working on that, and that branding will be added on top of the sign at a later date.
Through you, Your Worship, the tourism branding has been brought into the RFP for the branding itself, and it would still continue to stand alone. The branding is anticipated, but we don't know this yet. But when through the wayfinding, Entro provided quite a bit of design criteria which is desirable for the town. You may recall that in the wayfinding study, there was entrance signs that were proposed for the town. And they picked up a lot of the characteristics of the town that we've asked that be considered through the branding study, and also that the sparkle also be considered through the branding study. So at this point, I'm not able to give Councillor Belanger a complete and wholesome answer until the branding study is actually completed. But we've asked for consideration of that going forward.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thanks, Doug.
You're welcome.
Jocelyn, back to you.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Oh, actually, sorry. I think we'll just take a quick 5-minute break and then we'll come back. I'm trying to do the hour-and-a-half thing and then come back fresh. So sorry, Danny, we'll come back to you in 5 minutes.
We're live, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you, Dina. I will pass it back to you, Jocelyn.
Thank you, Your Worship. Our next presenter is Danny Rogers, Director of Building and Development Services for the Building Department. And Danny, I'll just load the slide. Give me a moment, please. Okay.
Thank you, Jocelyn, and good morning, Your Worship and Deputy Mayor Bray, members of council, and any of our residents who are following along today. I hope you're enjoying the budget presentations. It does mean that Christmas is just around the corner, and anyways, I have a couple of just very brief slides to go through. I'll point out off the top that you know, the operation of the building department is funded entirely through our permit fees. So we are projecting for 2022 approximately $971,000 in revenue. That includes permit fees based on a projected number of 350 the creation of 350 new dwelling units in the town next year. We're holding the line on the operating costs of the department in 2022. We're not asking to add any more staff, so our expenditures are covered by our projected revenue, and actually would allow us to put away approximately $83,000 in reserves in 2022. Something that I would like to point out, you know, it's always a bit of a crystal ball exercise when we're trying to predict what our starts are going to be next year. And seeing the type of numbers that we're seeing this year, one of the things that often happens is, you know, permits that we would project falling in the 2022 year may actually come in a bulk submission, you know, late in November or in December of this operating year. So that may very well, in communication with our builders, we are anticipating a couple of bulk submissions late this year. What we will do so that it's clear when the work happens associated with those permits, you know, work doesn't just stop at the issuance of the permit, it really just begins at that point. So in our monthly reporting next year, should we see bulk submissions come this year, what we will do is in our report to council and committee, we will identify very clearly when the work starts with the permits that get issued late this year. So for example, when a footing inspection happens, we will identify that as essentially the beginning of the work on a permit, and we will tell you what year that permit was issued in. So should we issue 100 new single family dwellings in the month of December this year, we all know that you know, those houses wouldn't be going in the ground next year. So through our reporting, we'll make it very clear when the work begins on those permits, even though they may be issued late in this calendar year. Before we move on to the next slide, I'd happily take any questions on anything I've said so far.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of Danny at this point? Okay, carry on, Danny.
Thank you. And very simply, our next slide just identifies some of the capital costs next year. We do have a vehicle 10 years old slated for replacement. You know, this is based on the town's criteria for vehicle replacement, and then have a small amount allocated for just update some of our equipment around the office, chairs and things like that, and some upgrades to our computer equipment. And I will also highlight that next year, 2022, is the first year that we will be able to offer to permit applicants, those who choose to take advantage of it, a fully digitized platform by which they can apply for permits, request inspections. So it's something that you know, you've heard talked about throughout the budget presentations today in terms of the software implementation that we've been working on. We're super excited to launch that, and it definitely will mean for us operational efficiencies moving forward.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Questions of Danny? All right. Thank you, Danny. Back to you, Jocelyn.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Danny. Okay, our next presentation will be from Giuliano Dunny, Manager, Beachfront Fleet and Purchasing, and he'll present the next few slides on fleet services. So, Giuliano, just one moment while I bring the presentation forward. Okay, you can proceed.
Thank you again, members of council and through the mayor. I have the capital fleet forecast for 2022. The first slide here refers to carryovers from this year. I gotta say that this has probably been the most difficult year that I've had seen with vehicles going to carryover, and a lot of it has to do with COVID, shortage of computer chips, factories closing down because of COVID, and we have a total of 9 units with a total value of $1.4 million that are actually part of the carryover fleet, and these are that will be carried into 2022, and these are the lists that I have up here. They include the light duty, the medium duty, and heavy duty vehicles. If anyone has any questions on this slide before I carry on to the 2022 budget.
Okay, thank you, Giuliano. Are you not showing us your face on purpose? We just have a kind of a blurred screen for you. Sorry, I saw, there you are.
Sorry.
Sorry, I saw some cards flashing, but I didn't catch who they were. If you could just put your card, Deputy Mayor Bray.
I do believe Councillor Wells actually put his up before me, if you'd like to go first.
Carry on, Deputy Mayor.
Okay. My question was to do with the specialized transit shared with the county, and I just wondered if you could speak a little bit about that, because I think it's a really exciting initiative for this community, if it is what I think it is.
Specialized vehicles, it's something that's still ongoing and in discussions with the county. Kevin might be able to expand on that when he brings up his presentation, but we're carrying forth that component into 2022, as that hasn't been finalized yet, from my understanding, with Kevin. And that's, just let me see here. No, that actually is part of the carryover over the 2022.
That's probably why I'm excited, because I've heard about it for a long time, and I certainly know that it was a need that was expressed during the last election, that a lot of people that are in their homes that maybe no longer drive have difficulties getting to appointments. And if this is the program I'm thinking, it would kind of extend the bus service with these specialized vehicles, so that people that maybe can't make it to the bus stop would actually still be able to take a bus to Barrie.
And we felt that hasn't still been finalized through with the county yet, those vehicles, because it is a shared cost with the county, those 2 vehicles that we're looking at purchasing.
Okay, thank you. And Kevin, if you can briefly touch on something later, if it's not ready to come forward, then we'll hear about it at a late. Okay, if you want to go now, go ahead.
Madam Mayor, I can speak to that through my presentation. I do have an item to speak to that and elaborate on that, if you don't mind.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. Giuliano, it's quite a long list of vehicles, and as you've indicated, some of them are carried forward from last year. And we do have this vehicle replacement policy in place that we keep a vehicle for a certain number of years, if I'm understanding that policy correctly. But I guess my question now is, the vehicles that are being replaced, I know that we do keep a few vehicles as surplus to the immediate needs, so that if something breaks down, there's a backup vehicle available. But I guess I'm wondering over time, how many of these surplus vehicles are we hanging on to? How many of these are still sitting in our fleet? And what happens with respect to all these vehicles we are replacing? You know, are they going out to auction? Are they going out to other communities? Like, I guess I'm not opposed to the plan you've laid out for the new vehicles, because I give you credit for sticking to the policy. But what I want to know is what's happening with all the ones that we've gotten rid of over the past few years.
Juliano?
Thank you for your question. That was part of my next slide, but I'm going to jump into the surplus fleet, if I can call that we have started with respect to light duty vehicles, and with the departmental summer needs for additional vehicles several years ago, and you're well aware that we started a surplus fleet. And basically the surplus fleet are vehicles that come out of our fleet at time of replacement, and due to to help alleviate the pressures that a lot of the departments had in wanting to purchase new vehicles because of summer students, summer staff coming on board, it was thought and prudent that let's say if we can squeeze a few more years out of them for the summer months from these light duty vehicles, we would make them available to the departments that need them in the summertime. We have established that there's a surplus fleet of approximately 15 vehicles that seems to have stabilized over the last 2-3 years. And basically, as vehicles come out of the regular fleet, and if they're still worthy to be hanging on to a couple of years or not or more, then they will go into the surplus fleet, and the surplus fleet vehicles will then be disposed of accordingly. And most all vehicles usually end up going to the auction. Anything that comes out of the fleet that we no longer need. So hopefully that's answered your question, Stan.
Thank you. No, that's fine. Thank you, Juliano.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Foster?
Yeah, Your Worship, I understand with the medium and certainly the heavy duty vehicles, there isn't really an environmentally better option. But have we considered anything on the hybrid for the light vehicles if they're available?
Juliano?
Yeah, we will definitely be looking at that in the very near future. Right now, just to get a hold of any vehicle is a very difficult thing. The hybrid vehicles are pretty well already, and fully electrical vehicles have been, from what I've been talking to dealers, been pretty well purchased already. And it's a challenge to see how that's going to unfold in the next year or two to clear up all this backlog. But that's something that definitely we'll be looking into in the foreseeable future with the electrification of vehicles, especially on the light duty side.
Councillor Blanchet?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just further to the hybrid vehicles is that Council recently received an update from Simcoe County on, I guess, their first hybrid or a fully electric vehicle. I won't mention the brand because we don't want to promote any of the brands, but it was quite a glowing result. They were extremely happy with the reduction in cost and obviously the impact on the environment. So it may be something that we look at doing sooner than later, and then to do the same kind of evaluation, because it was quite impressive, the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to carry on with your presentation, Juliano?
So for the 2022 budget, the slides, awesome, thank you. For our maintenance operations, they're similar to last year. For light duty vehicles, actually, let me just start with, I had some notes here, if I may. The method and process we go through in how capital replacement vehicles are decided. We have our fleet capital replacement strategy made up of 3 components. It's initiated with Schedule A from our tangible capital asset policy. The town fleet is placed on a 10 and 4-year vehicle equipment acquisition forecast schedule that brings up from year to year, so we know where the vehicles are coming up for renewal. And then a follow-up, a vehicle equipment evaluation and inspection report is completed with the mechanics, and we evaluate the unit through a scoring program. And this will assess if the vehicle, it requires to be replaced, or maybe we can hang on to it a year or two. And at times we do hang on to them, and we have some that again this year that did come up in the 2022 forecast, but have been removed and deferred to future years. I apologize, they're not on the list, but we have a total of 4 units that total value of approximately $850,000 that have been deferred into future years that would have been come up in our 2022 budget year. As I continue, we have hang on, Jocelyn, go too fast. No, okay, the heavy duty vehicles, we have, I want to make note that because of the COVID, because the vehicles are now so hard to get a hold of, we have 2 vehicles, tandem axle sander plows, that we know will not be received in 2020, in a year's time. So we have 2 of them from 2023 that we're asking council to bring forth into the 2022 part of the 2022 budget, but they will be paid out in 2023, knowing full well that they will not be received in 2022. We're having very difficult time with receiving these vehicles, and from my understanding and talking to Chris Roos, it's the same thing that we're doing with the ice resurfacer for the new arena. We'll have to request that we put that in the budget for 2022, but knowing very well that it will be paid out into 2023, so we'll not have tax implications on the 2022 budget year. If we have any other questions, but the only thing that I must say, and I apologize for this, the new for 2022 budget also includes the fire platform truck that council has dealt with in the previous special meeting budget, but that will be, those numbers will follow up in the draft 2 budget.
Okay, any questions of Giuliano? Councillor Foster?
Yeah, sorry, just the accounting thing on that 2023 versus 2022. Why would we put it on 2022 budget if it's not going to be paid out till 2023? That's probably to Jocelyn, I think.
Jocelyn?
Thank you, Your Worship. So in order to spend, once you want to put the purchase order out onto the vendor, you're going to do that in 2022. You need authority to spend those funds and commit them, and that's why it comes into the 22 budget.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. CAO, I saw your card.
Thank you, Worship. No, the councillor asked the question and the treasurer provided the response. So I was just going to elaborate on that. So that's been covered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Giuliano, did you have anything else more on your presentation?
No, unless there's any further questions. Thank you.
Okay. Last chance. Okay, I see nothing else. Thanks, Giuliano. Back to you, Jocelyn.
Thank you, Your Worship. So our final presentation is provided by Kevin Lalonde, Director of Public Works, and I'll just put your slides up, Kevin. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. Through you and members of council, I'm pleased to present the proposed operating and capital budget for the Public Works Department for 2022. As certainly everyone is aware, we're responsible for right-of-way activities and operations, including roads, drainage, water, wastewater, parks, engineering services, transit, and the administration and implementation of our capital works program. Next slide, please. As we look into and at the notable changes for operations and related studies for next year, I'd like to highlight a few items. Under transportation services, we have the 5-year update to the town's transportation study. And this study helps guide decision-making and forecasting as it relates to our capital transportation program and related upgrades, including urbanization, widening, intersection improvements, and signalization. Similarly, we have the biannual structural inspections, or as we commonly refer to them as our OSIM inspections. And these are engineered inspections of our vehicular and pedestrian bridges every 2 years. With respect to drainage, we continue with the multi-year drainage master plan, which is a 2-year study, and appropriate costs have been carried forward to complete that in 2022. And further to, I guess, Deputy Mayor Bray's comment, I just wanted to highlight that we will be issuing the RFP for transit operation services as the contract with Landmark, I was going to say Sinton, Landmark Transportation is set to expire in the summer of 2022. So once again, we will be looking to partner with our neighboring municipalities as part of the procurement initiative, similar to that, what we did in 2014. Now, as it relates to specialized transit, we're currently waiting the results from the county's transportation master plan to confirm opportunities to partner with them for this service. Certainly, we want to leverage existing resources and capacity available, as they currently provide that service through our community with the Links Plus transit. And alternatively, if that is not a solution, we will be including this as part of our RFP for conventional systems. So in 2019, the county provided a proposal to the town to offer this service. However, due to competing priorities and other commitments with the rollout of their subsequent phases for transit, this proposal, was put on hold until more recently with the transportation master plan. So they haven't been able to commit to providing that service as it was incorporated into their overall transportation planning process. So we're hopeful we can leverage the county's fleet and systems. Otherwise, that will be a component to the RFP that we will need to get out the door fairly quick in the new year, should we have a new operator for the transit operation services in its entirety. There are no routes proposed for 2022, and so it will be an existing two conventional route system. Certainly, specialized transit still continues to be provided through the Red Cross. However, we'd like to bring that, we'll say, in-house and maximize the opportunities for our residents. Just before we go on, as for staffing, the department has worked well in the past with optimizing and reallocating staffing resources to meet levels of service and the desired needs of the community. In fact, we've not increased our full-time staffing complement in over 10 years for both the roads, water, and wastewater divisions. Recent and continued growth applies pressure on the department, and staffing is needed to better manage priorities, implement best management practices, and deliver services to an acceptable and sustainable level. And council has included in their budget package is the justification reports that we are submitting to be further discussed under draft 2 for a roads maintenance person, as well as 2 licensed water and wastewater operators. Next slide, please, Jocelyn. As we look at the upcoming roads capital program for next year, there are several multi-year projects that were initiated this past year and will carry forward, including the completion of Remblewood Drive urbanization, which is the surface asphalt and final boulevard restoration. We have the River Road West utility relocations between Veterans Way and Blueberry Trails. Wasaga Distribution are working hard to get the new pole line in place this year, at which point we'll allow Bell and Rogers to transfer their plants next year, which certainly, having the utilities out of the way, will help our opportunities for funding and certainly meet those funding timelines that typically accompany those programs. We also have carryover for the West End Elevated Tower and depot lands, which includes the site preparation, stormwater management, Joan Avenue construction, and servicing and construction. And this, we're still waiting for NVCA permits to get that work underway. Next, we continue with our roads maintenance and pavement resurfacing priorities in 2022, and our typical day labor budget for these works will remain unchanged at $400,000. And last but certainly not least, and of particular importance, we will be finalizing the detailed design for Beach Drive reconstruction early in the new year, and with tendering proposed for phase 1, which is 1st Street to 3rd Street. That's coming summer. Next slide, please. Shifting to water wastewater projects, we have several multi-year projects again that will carry forward into next year, including the tertiary filter upgrades, the biosolids complex upgrades, as well as the Beechwood Road trunk water main extension. And this project specifically is a prerequisite for the future elevated water tower, which will accommodate the West End growth. Also, we have the Joanne Crescent servicing and construction, and that project is being driven through local improvement petition, as council is aware. and we're hoping for a spring start with that small servicing contract. With respect to the inlet building and bar screen upgrades, there's inadequate headworks treatment at the facility, which creates loading issues. So that subsequently affects aeration efficiency and treatment performance. The design for these upgrades are currently underway, and we're looking to retrofit that next year, certainly taking into account long-term growth and related projections all the way out through to 2051. As well, at the water pollution control plant, we have the UV system upgrades, and it was brought to our attention and Aqua's attention by Trojan, who is our UV system manufacturer and supplier, that after July of 2022, the parts for our existing UV system will be discontinued. So staff are recommending to advance this project accordingly. It was originally slated for 2024, and we're looking to advance that in 2022. Finally, the terms of reference for the Beach Area 1 detailed design, our consultants continue with the sanitary sewer design along that portion of Molesley Street, including downstream pump station replacements, as we do know upsizing is necessary to facilitate the full build out of the beachfront properties. And at the time, that construction is not likely anticipated until at least the third block or the third phase of development. So we're hoping to stage that construction accordingly. Next slide, please. Not much to report in terms of capital drainage, simply carryover projects from this year, final restoration and any end of warranty works for Bay Sands area drainage contract, as well the continuation and completion of the municipal Class EA for the Constance Thomas overland flow route and drainage improvements. Next slide, please. From a transit capital perspective, we will be continuing with the transit stop and shelter improvements program. And we have 2 new shelters proposed again for next year. And the costs for this program continue to be leveraged through the ICIP transit stream funding that we received a couple of years ago. Next slide, please. And moving into parks, we have another busy year in the parks division, and you will recall Glendale Park redevelopment that is being carried forward to the spring, summer of next